What's up? Can y'all hear me? Yes. What up, Nico? Hello, a darkness-loving female. Thank you for joining us. I have one story to read tonight. Then I'll just, if nobody sends me anymore, I'll just pick and choose different ones. And Sinatra, what's up, dude? Of course. And yeah, well, I got a hole right above my head, so it's actually the stars. Sucks when it rains. Yeah, if you guys want to send me one, either just send me the link in Discord or on Twitter, one of the two. So how's everybody doing tonight? Everybody doing good? Everybody have a decent week? Well, I know Nico has freaking sinus infection. I know April's feeling sick. What's up, Crow? What's up, Unwound Boat? I'm doing all right. I got the computer going again last week. So honestly, because I'm changing up the schedule because I was uploading every single day and everything. And a couple of people were telling me maybe I should cut that down a little bit and do like the live stream and then 2 videos. And what's up, Mandy? And honestly, it's been a boring ass week. I already have my Wednesday video done, had it done for days. And now that I'm not uploading every single day, it's boring. It is boring. No, I know, but honestly, I was feeling slightly stressed out trying to do it every single day. It gets a little stressful because a lot of stories have female parts that I need and things like that. Thank you, Nico. And so, I mean, it does get a little stressful trying to do it every single day, but it kept me busy. I'm disabled. I'm sitting here broke. I ain't never got no money to do anything or any crap like that. So it was giving me something to do, which is nice. Let me look into this story Nico here sent me. All right. Oh, wait.
Stay a while and listen.
Stay a while and listen. All right. So, but yeah, so I'm thinking about maybe doing 3 videos plus the live stream. So I don't know. I'll try something, but 2 videos just not enough, especially going from 1 a day. Johnny, did you miss Deckard Cain, Johnny? Because I just played him. Like literally, I just played him. What's up, Mr. Reality? Mr. Reality was sporting one of my shirts earlier. Mr. Reality, dude, you are freaking buff, man. You're all ripped and everything. I was like, damn. 4 warnings, thanks. All right, though. So I will get to reading a story. This is the one Nico sent me. After this one, I'll read the one by Banning Kellum. All right. So this one is by Zachary Damon. And it's called I Own a Dog Kennel and Something's in There. Okay, guys, I've got an issue. I've noticed this sub seems to be where a lot of you guys talk about supernatural and straight up weird. And it seems like I can maybe find some advice here. Now, I own a boarding kennel. It's not my first choice for a business, to tell you the truth. My mother basically handed me the management of the place in exchange for letting her be a 30% partner in the company. It sounds like a lot, but the business averages around $70,000 to $100,000 a year because we live around a bunch of wealthy New York City commuters who are willing to drop pretty much any price to make sure their fur babies are well kept for. And since we're not the only kennel, and since we're the only kennel in the area that offers 3 walks a day plus air conditioning and heating for when the weather is too extreme on either end, we charge a pretty hefty amount. Add the fact the kennel itself is small enough to be a 1 or 2 person operation for most of the year, meaning I don't have many employees to pay. It all evens out. I get a very livable wage. My mom has regular money flowing into her retirement, and my employees are willing to work dirt cheap since they're normally high school dog lovers who just do it to play with the puppies. Honestly, I'm not much of a dog person myself. My mom had this thing since I was a kid, and we had 7 dogs at home of our own. Way too many, if you ask me. I've always been more naturally inclined towards cats and rodents, things that don't make as much noise and who know to sit in the designated parts of the house instead of on the rug right outside of my bedroom. That being said, this is a lot of money, and to be totally honest, it's not very hard. It's not very hard money to make. I figured it's just a job, and I could use the income to help prop me up as a writer or filmmaker or whatever I'm still deciding to do with my life. Besides, I make enough that I can hire people to work most of the week so I can focus on my passion projects full time. I normally have 3 employees, each working 2 to 3 days a week. I make sure there's always 2 working at the same time while one gets a day off. As previously mentioned, they get paid pretty poorly, but to be fair, they're part-time workers and normally only seasonal to begin with. Plus, it's under the table work, so it's not taxed. I keep them on for as long as I can afford to have them on just to make my load as light as possible. People who decide they want to work at a dog kennel are normally a little out there. I've had parolees, druggies, plenty of hippies. It just comes down with the territory. It just comes with the territory. You can't really be too picky with your employees. You can just put your faith in them to do their job well, and for the most part, they do. However, when this story takes place, I was working alone. Every so often, the kennel goes through somewhat of a dry spell where we just don't have too many dogs during our busy season, aka summer. When that happens, I let my employees go. And that was the background for this event. There were only 5 runs in a 30-run kennel, and I didn't see the point of continuing to pay 3 employees. So I told them they probably weren't going to get many hours for the foreseeable future and sent them on their merry ways. Now, due to reports that there were starting to be few pretty large dog fighting rings in the town surrounding mine, I dug into my war chest and had a kennel covered in CCTV cameras and collected and installed a top-of-the-line security system. It cost me an arm and a leg, but I figured it would be infinitely cheaper than a lawsuit and my guilt if some psychos broke into the kennel to steal some dogs for a fight ring. Hey, crazier things have happened. Now I went into the kennel sometime late July to take out the dogs, check our reservations, check messages, all the fun stuff. Now I noticed something was really odd about the dogs. They all seemed to shy well away from me, which was incredibly strange because they were not skittish dogs. What was stranger, though, was they weren't aggressive either. Normally, a scared dog would be just that, scared. However, backed into a corner, they will normally growl and eventually bite. Even though every single dog in the kennel backed itself into a corner from me, none of them so much as made a peep. They all let me put leashes on them and coax them outside, and to be fair, after a few minutes of being in the yard and sniffing me, they seemed comforted by my presence again and acted more their usual selves. However, this was exceedingly strange to me, and I would lie if I said I wasn't a little unnerved. I after I managed all the business of the morning, I went to a nearby coffee shop and decided to watch the CCTV footage from a feed I had set up on my laptop. I think I was trying to reassure myself the dogs had had a rough night, but I also wanted to make sure no creep was trying to get in. I figured if nothing else, it would put my mind at ease to know what was going on. I put the footage on double speed and let it run from when I'd locked up. I knew it would take a while for something to happen, but I had nowhere to be and figured a coffee and an audiobook while watching this footage might be a good way to spend the afternoon. Well, 2 hours in, 1.5 coffees down, and on the last chapter of how to win friends and influence people, I saw my first sign of a problem. 3 of my screens went static, like you'd see on TVs when the cable goes out. But the whole screens didn't go static, just parts of them. The bottom left corner of one, the entire bottom third of another, all of one camera, except for a small bit in the corner, still picking up video. Obviously, I perked up, taking out my headphones and leaning closer. The dogs were going absolutely bonkers. I didn't need the audio to tell me that much. It was 2:12 in the morning, according to the feed. And then I noticed the static moved, at varying intervals, no rhythm to it. I counted, and nada. The static would shift its position on the screen, sometimes covering the entire camera, just moving to a different part or spreading to different cameras. Over the next hour, or a little over, I think, almost all the cameras went at least part static. Thank you, Bad Vibes. Needless to say, I was concerned. At first, my more irrational mind kicked in, and I thought that I was hacked just because of the way the cameras lost their image seemed very strange and almost deliberate to me. And that thought quickly went away, however. Nothing was missing from the cash box, and even if something was, all that these hackers would have been able to secure by disabling my cameras would have been $80 in cash and a check for $60. Quite the haul for hackers advanced enough to get in and disable my cameras piecemeal like they did. The next thought was that the camera glitched out. I went back to the kennel, called customer support, and after unplugging some wires and pushing a few buttons, I was assured by Mr. Lincoln E. Tech Support on the other end of the line that my problem should cease. But should they continue, I had a warranty for another 6 months, and I could get the whole shebang replaced, should I so desire. And for 2 weeks after that, all was quiet. No more camera issues. The dogs were never odd again. For good measure, I added a new deadbolt to the office door, and nothing ever tampered with that. It seemed like that was going to be one and done. Strange night type deal. Hooray, happy ending. Me and my cameras heading to the sunset, accompanied by hookers and coke. Right? Well, after those 2 weeks of business as usual, I went down to the kennel, opened the door, and lo and behold, the now 10 dogs were all, once again, scared into passivity of me. I checked the CCTV again at 1:06 a.m. The cameras went static in varying intervals and varying ways for an hour, and it stopped again. My lump of fear turned into some righteous anger when I saw Jax, the oldest dog in the kennel, a 13-year-old golden retriever, seizing on the floor when the static went away. I went to check on Jax more closely, looking for signs of a stroke or something, and thank God it didn't look like anything serious had happened. But I was fucking seething. I didn't know what was going on, and as far as I knew, it might have been some asshole kids from the local tech school fucking with me, playing with my cameras, breaking into the kennel, and poisoning an unlucky pooch. In hindsight, that is an absolutely stupid assumption, but I was not thinking clearly. This kennel is my livelihood, and these dogs are people's family members. My business depends on how well I can keep people's best friends safe and sound, and the fact that something happened that coincided with the most unnerving thing to happen in that kennel in my entire time there was enough to push me over the edge. At this point, I had an idea about when it would happen next time. After doing a brief review, I knew it would probably happen 2 weeks from then, probably at 1-ish a.m., so I bided my time. I decided to not call the police and handle this myself. Again, in hindsight, not my best decision, but I wanted this problem to be solved in-house. So let's fast forward 2 weeks into the future. Now, at this point, I was glad I'd been a supporter of the Second Amendment, because trust me when I say that my shotgun was making me feel much safer. I set an alarm on my phone for 12:30 to make sure that I was ready to take on whoever was messing with me. Most of the night was pretty uneventful, just me hanging around and waiting for what was going to come. The alarm went off, and I got ready. The minutes ticked past pretty slowly, I guess. I got a sick feeling in my stomach. I think the dogs felt it too, even though the kennel was mostly empty. I could feel all their eyes turned to me at about 10 to 1. It was a pleading, but what specifically, I couldn't tell you. They're just dogs after all. At 1:55, as 1:55 rolled around, I got an intense urge to run. I don't know where to, but I remember having to fight my muscles wanting to propel me out the nearest door. I picked up a shotgun and made sure to look as intimidating as fuck. I had no intention of using it. I kept the shells meant for the gun in my hand. If it was what an idiot. If it was kids, like I originally thought it was, I didn't want to shoot them. And they would have to be really fucking stupid to want to tangle with a guy in a dark kennel waving a shotgun in their face. 1:00, the dogs go fucking bonkers. They're barking, but it's not the barking they'll give to me when they see me. A greeting? This was anger. This was terror. Sheer terror. This was fight or flight kicking in the truest sense of the term. And because they had nowhere to run, they were going to fight. I made sure to keep my hands away from the wire in case they grabbed me by mistake. 1:06 rolled around. I saw someone by the window of the back door to the kennel. I didn't think he saw me, which made me have to grin. The motherfucker had no clue I was there, and god damn it if I wasn't gonna make this asshole piss his pants right back out that door as soon as he made the mistake to walk in. And the door opened normally, which was when my heart went into my stomach. I knew that door was locked. I knew it. I locked that fucker myself, and here it was opening like nothing. I remember very distinctly seeing a dark silhouette of the door swinging open with little rectangular shape of a deadbolt in the same position as it would have been in the wall, jutting out. The fact there was no resistance at all is what put me off guard. Then it walked in. Now, here's the thing. I'm not sure exactly what it was. It was a dark silhouette, vaguely in the shape of a person, but obviously inhuman at the same time. Just the way it held itself, what I could make out from its features, it was just all wrong. Its back was arched, its arms were gangly, and it had long, long hair down well past its neck. It very slowly took a step forward, its foot scraping against the concrete floor. I had a feeling in my gut not to move, and glancing out of the corner of my eye, I saw the dogs had the same thought because they were as still as statues, something most dogs never, ever manage by themselves. I know, right? Let the dogs out. It walked forward, step by step, slowly. I could feel it smiling, which made my stomach churn even more than it already was. And it kept walking forward slowly and slowly, its foot scraping against the floor with each step. It stopped at the dog closest to it and extended a hand through the wire, its arm now inhumanly long, maybe extending to 4 or 5 feet to reach the terrified thing trembling in the corner. And I heard it whisper in my voice, my own fucking voice, "Good doggy. Good doggy." And it petted it for a while. I heard it whimper in fear, and after a few minutes, it went along. It stopped at every run. It pet every dog, just sending its hand through the wired fence of the run, somehow, and extending it to reach the dogs. Good doggy. 30 fucking minutes. It did that for 30 fucking minutes, and then it reached me. I was standing in the corridor as I intended to point my shotgun menacingly at whatever came through the door, though I was in the far back corner, so it was bound to reach me last if it was going in order. But it saw me, and it walked up to me. Unlike the dogs who were protected by their cages from the thing up close and personal, I was completely exposed. Well, put it back in your pants, buddy. And it got right up to me. I felt it get within inches of my face. I felt its breath on me. It was cold and it smelled like rot. I could feel its arms reach around me, but they never touched me, but hovered inches off of me. excuse me, threatening to close in like pythons. They were wrapped all around my body, but the only part of it that touched me were its hands as this thing stroked my head. It petted me repeatedly. What's up, boogeyman? I could feel sharp fingernails grazing my scalp, its clammy skin on mine, and it whispered, "Good doggy, good doggy," in my voice. And it did this for what felt like hours. How could it feel like anything less? And eventually it unwrapped its arms from me, and it walked back, petting every dog again, and then it reached where it entered, and it closed the door behind it. When it was all said and done, I saw that I'd pissed myself. As did most of the dogs. I cleaned up my mess, then the dogs, then went to my fiance's place and stayed up facing the door all night. I didn't tell her. I told her I just felt like the couch that night and pretended I'd just woken up when she was awake. I'm sure she could smell through my lie from a mile away, but she didn't push me. That's all I've got. I've got 12 days until this thing comes back. I don't know what to do. Does this sound like anything you guys might know of? Is there any way to get rid of it? Is there a way to get rid of it safely? What can I do? And how did it get my voice? Hey, what's up, 3 a.m. with Creeperella? All right, so there goes that story. Thank you, Nico. You guys, please remember to like, comment, share, all that fancy stuff. And if there are some of you here that are not sub to each other, check out each other's channels, sub to each other, support each other, all that good stuff, you know? It's always a good thing. Always a good thing. Did the blanket move again? Did my blanket move again? Oh, were you just talking about it? Okay. All right, then. Because, yeah, apparently my blanket likes to move. I actually seen it do it once myself, and a couple other people have seen it too, apparently. Has it been glitching out at all this time? The live stream? Like it was last time? Did it do it once? Just once? I wonder why it's doing that. Interesting. Yeah, it splits into fourths and then does this weird thing. I don't know. I don't understand why it's doing that. All right, so how's everybody doing? Everybody good? Everybody having a good night? I know some of you aren't having a good night. If anyone has any other stories they would like me to read, then please either send me the link to them on Twitter or send them to me on Discord if you're on my Discord. Excuse me. All right, I will get on to the next story. My voice distorted once? Well, that's weird. Better knock that crap off. All right, this is a story by K. Banning Kellum, right? That's correct, right? Pretty sure it is. Oh, come on. Yeah, K. Banning Kellum. That's what I thought. Just making sure. All right, this is called Total Universal Blackout. 25th Sector, Access Point 110, Department 677, Location Joint Base Terra, Hydragate, Pluto, 13th Millennium. Larson stood up from his tiny bed, eyes wide and gasping for air. He had had the dream again. He walked over to the small alcove that served as his bathroom. A metal sink was bolted to the wall with a mirror permanently affixed above it. He looked at himself for a long time. His face was haggard. His eyes were bloodshot, and he couldn't tell if he was aging too fast or too poorly. Perhaps both. He was both an instructor and an overseer here. The mission was always the mission was always the same: to exist until they need not exist. Today was a very important piece of that particular little platitude. There was a slight knock at the door to his quarters. His assistant, Dr. Sierra Copeland, was no doubt ready to begin the day's activities. She was confident that her last batch of calculations was the cure for the issue at hand. He wasn't sure if he trusted her equation or not, but he knew that today would be the day to succeed or fail. Either way, he wouldn't be waking up here tomorrow. This had to go right. "Good morning," she announced as he opened the door. "Major Larson, are you ready to make history?" "Remake history, Sierra," he corrected. She smiled, and they walked together into the lab where history's greatest minds waited to finally pull the trigger on their destiny. The two scientists walked over to a large blackboard where other great minds stood, applying notes, advancing equations, removing errors, and correcting predictions. One of the researchers turned with a look of drunken excitement on his face. Larson wasn't sure if that exaggerated expression of enthrallment was comforting or not. His department had already made multiple errors in judgment, and his superiors had warned his entire team that the natural order of continuity would not be able to take much more tampering. Although both Larson and his chief scientist, Dr. Copeland, were well aware of the consequences, the board of directors felt reiterating the point was still prudent. "It'll go dark, all of it, an entire universe drenched in eternal nothingness," their vice president of future projects informed them. Sierra had a look of frightened awe mixed with a dash of fascination that Larson didn't quite like. She'd never seen a universe go dark before, but Larson had. He always refused to talk about it. Now, as he stood before the group of men and women in lab coats, he decided it was time to share the story. He clapped his hands several times, causing those working behind large computer monitors to stop typing and look up. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have all worked incredibly hard over the last year, and thanks to your tireless efforts, we are less than an hour away from what is likely our final attempt at realignment. I know that I stress the importance of a successful recalculation every time, but with the continuity threading already in such a weakened state, I think all of you already know what could potentially happen." There was a murmur of agreement from the staff before Larson continued. "I'm sure some of you have heard that my last duty assignment I observed a TUB, a total universal blackout, can and will happen if too many recalculations are conducted. And let me tell you, it's a nightmare." The man dressed in a suit took a drag off his cigarette and raised his hand. Larson nodded for him to speak. Per routine, the man stood and stated his era of origin. "17th century, he began. "At the risk of sounding rude, sir, would you tell us a bit about the experience?" Larson was prepared for this question. They all wanted to know. A TUB is the big scary that all potential recruits whisper about. Larson often debated the value of going into the story with his staff. His greatest concern was always that he'd create a degree of apprehension that could disrupt an otherwise talented operator. The other end of that argument was that if his previous team had known the full risks, then perhaps they wouldn't be his previous team at all. He pondered this moral and ethical seesaw quite often. If he kept them in the dark, they'd be able to focus on their work without the constant knowledge of what the worst possible scenario of failure consisted of. On the other hand, arming his crew with more knowledge meant they'd have more resources in their toolboxes, and the additional fear could possibly translate into a greater attention to detail. Last time, he decided to split the difference and let them work in the hopes that it wouldn't come down to the wire in respect to continuity threading. Now, they were here, though, and he didn't want to see another TUB. Now, it was time to give class. 11,000 years ago, the 20th century, for those of you who are just recruited from that era, I'm sure you're well aware of the sheer amount of technological and scientific advancements that took place during that time. Imagine being a child born at the turn of that century. You grew up in a world where horse travel is still common sight. Automobiles slowly began to appear here and there, but at a pace that is controlled and orderly. Then, all of a sudden, two men from North Carolina build a machine that can fly. A short time later, people are traveling from one side of the ocean to the other in a matter of hours instead of weeks. Later still, we send people into space. By the time that child grows into an old man, he could potentially experience the internet, cellular technology, virtual reality, the list goes on. It's a big mess, and we caused a lot of that in the early stages of this project. Sierra Copeland spoke for the first time in a while. He's speaking of the big press, as we often call it. Our first few experiments yielded too much comprehension on the grand continuity and one rule governing the universe. Instead of technological advances coming out of the proper spacing, they were all mashed into one century. What we feared most happened. We ended up with a true runaway string. The overload of 2102, a young woman mumbled. Exactly, Larson said, picking up the story. When the servers went down on March 2nd of 2102, we lost almost all of human history in a single glitch. All of the world's knowledge and history had been converted to the servers. Textbooks were a thing of the past, so forgotten that entire generations came and went without ever touching one. Now, who can tell me what came after the overload? The dim ages, replied all in attendance. That's right. It wasn't too difficult to get the servers back up. But what people didn't expect was that all the stored information would be lost. Within the course of 100 years, most people on Earth didn't have the slightest idea of what happened before 2102. It was as if all history before that, everything from the dinosaurs to the Great Pyramids to the Renaissance and beyond, eventually reached a critical protocol. You're speaking of the Terra theory, a young man spoke. Correct. It's a terrifying theory. Dr. Terra, her last name never revealed, was a scientist that lived at some point around the late 23rd century. She believed that perception and reality weren't just related, but were literally the same force. Her writings suggested that if all of the Earth's history was going to be forgotten, that it would immediately stop existing. Any and all impact on society that had formed through the normal cause and effect of human advancement would become moot, and what the world would be left with would be a planet populated by humanity existing in some form of pseudo-amnesia. But we got through the dim ages. I mean, we must have. I'm from the 27th century, and we weren't a bunch of idiots with no knowledge of the past, a woman demanded from her station. Larson, realizing that he'd slipped back into the old mannerisms of an instructor, answered, And who here knows why Miss Dean is able to state that as truth? The Society for Knowledge and Preservation, answered another staffer. Correct. During the century or so leading into the dim ages, those fortunate enough to store sources of history on portable devices began to rebuild history. However, even this had many problems and ultimately led to one of the most violent wars in Earth's history. Copeland chimed in, fully aware that her partner would not proceed with their task now until he was satisfied he'd held class. She didn't mind, though, as she herself was rather interested in hearing his encounter with the TUB. If sitting through a lecture was what it took, she was happy to oblige and assist. He's talking about the intellectual caste system that reared its ugly head around the middle of the 24th century. What we saw was a frightening repeat of a very long, forgotten system of government. Those that compiled the most information formed what resembled the Catholic Church's rule during the 5th century Earth after the fall of the Roman Empire. Instead of religion, though, education became the doctrine of life. To attend a class meant to question nothing and to take any information given by the teacher as 100% truth. After all, only the society had access to the world's history by this time. There were several other unnerving elements to this in addition to the slow but undeniable grab for power being orchestrated. Firstly, the society didn't have all of the information, or at least not all of it in one place. They were so greedy and eager to rule that they didn't even trust each other. Special branches were formed to oversee different fields of information. Only a very select few were given access to all of it, and rumors still abound that there was a tier above them that knew even more. So the classes being taught to the general public at this point were likely filled with incorrect facts. Dates were wrong, names were wrong, and entire portions of curriculums were just omitted. The next issue was in job placement and training. Since education was no longer an individual pursuit, positions were assigned rather than sought out. Society was on the verge of falling into a dictatorship. Government officials and world leaders were either deep in the pockets of the society or they were so irrelevant that even calling them figureheads at this point would be giving them too much credit. So, in a last-ditch effort to regain the order that carried us out of the Middle Ages, in the first place, a campaign was developed to liberate the information from the society and allow it to be freely distributed back into the world's population. World War Void. A few voices spoke in low tones, as though saying it too loud might somehow bring it back into existence. That's right, Larson picked back up. The society had no real military. It wasn't even a government entity. What they had become, though, was fanatical. When the world came knocking, demanding their history back, those in charge made the ultimate decision in the name of their greed and lust for control. This initiated the void. All information was wiped from their databanks, and all of the Earth's documented history was eradicated. In response to this, the leaders of the world deemed they should pay with their lives. Those in charge were executed for this unprecedented act of selfish cowardice. No, it wasn't a spider, it was a stink bug. Hold on, I lost. Okay. In their lower tier members, the teachers who had been dispensing education similar to how the Church of Rome dispensed rule of law during the Dark Ages, using fear and confusion to gain control and dependence, were arrested and charged with everything from global terrorism to treason. Their punishments were served not behind bars, though, but rather in concentration camp-style office complexes. 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, they were forced to rebuild the servers one class at a time. This seemed like a fitting punishment. However, it was almost impossible to fact-check everything. These people could input entire lessons that would come out as larger pieces of fiction than fact. Furthermore, even with inmates working around the clock behind the keyboards, it would take centuries or more to actually rebuild even a quarter of the information lost. And in the meantime, society was collapsing once more. It was a race against the clock, and the government was losing. With every death, knowledge was lost. With every birth, a new brain came into the world that would require information. The biggest concern was that these teachers taken prisoner wouldn't live forever. With their deaths would come no replacement at the keyboard, and when the last of them did pass away, World War Void swooped in for the kill. Larson reached for a drink of water. "Does anyone need a break?" he asked, and was delighted to see that all eyes were hungrily locked on him. He was an instructor once more, and as anyone passionate about teaching would tell, there's no satisfaction like having the classroom's undivided attention. He continued. By the start of the 26th century, society had fallen. When the initial server collapsed in the overload of 2102, people had no one to blame. The server shut down due to no one entity's neglect or intent. It was a global crisis, but one that allowed people to attempt to all work together to solve rather than turn on anyone to blame. This time, however, people blame the government for provoking the society in the first place. They cited poor leadership and command decisions. They cited a rushed operation carried out by inexperienced officials. Before the first decade of the 26th century could conclude, the world was literally and figuratively on fire. Loss of life was calculated to be the 85% range globally. With what few stable governments remained by the start of the Void War barely had any form of standing militaries left. Many of the soldiers simply quit. Many more left to join those that looked to overthrow the very commanders. The world powers retreated together in Moscow, Russia. The city was converted into a massive military outpost. If at this point anyone actually knew that Moscow had been the downfall of many wood invaders, they'd have likely applied that logic to their decision. In truth, though, Moscow was the only city left on Earth with a functioning power grid. Before Larson continued, a sagely voice spoke up. Major Larson, if I may. An elderly man with a long white beard asked. Larson nodded. 16th century Earth here, and, well, a few others. As some of you may know, who have spoken with me from time to time, as a lad I was involved with one of the history's most survivable layer flux anomalies. They are very rare, you see, and very few who encounter one live to talk about it. Ah, yes, this is indeed a fascinating story, Mr. Cornelius has shared with me from time to time. There is no such thing as useless knowledge, in my estimation, so please, sir, do tell, Larson invited. Well, we are on a bit of a schedule here. Perhaps you could enlighten us afterwards, Copeland suggested. Oh, I promise you, fair lady, this bears importance. Copeland glanced at Larson, who nodded once. Very well, but please do not derail the current operation with too much banter, she informed the elder, and he smiled in good-natured agreement. Thank you. As a young man, I lived wherever the wind took me, or so I used to like to brag. I spent most of my youth traveling Europe, although I did find my way into the Middle East once or twice. My desire then was, as it is now, to learn as much as I could about everything. I was far too energetic for the classroom, though. So I took to the life of a rogue. I'd go place to place, working what tasks were needed, helping where I could earn enough coin to sleep under a room with a full belly. On one of my many travels across the countryside, though, I found myself somewhere wondrous indeed. By this point in my life, you see, I was a true expert at navigating the land around me. I could read the stars better than most men could read a map. I was passing through France at the time, and my intended destination was Spain. I'd used my legs for all their worth, and it was sea travel that I was craving. The New World, what would eventually be called the United States, was a place where a man like me could go and find new avenues of adventure and enlightenment. I'd traveled this path between many times before, as many of my endeavors took me through these countries. I'd actually spent the previous night with a family that I'd known for some time in a little French village that I knew very well. So when I came across the new road signs and landmarks, I began to question if perhaps I'd stepped off course. I simply couldn't see how that could be, though, as I was very quite certain I'd never wandered off the road. Perhaps I could have ignored the signpost, as those are easy to erect within a day, but the hills and trees that I saw in the distance certainly could not have appeared in a month or so since I'd last ventured this way. I walked on, though, enthralled by the strange sights around me. The trees were not native to any part of Europe that I'd ever seen.
Leaves growing from these trees were covered in little spots like ladybug. The colors were unusual as well. Some leaves showed pastel spots where others were black with angry red swirls. The fruit hanging from the branches was even more bizarre. Red bulbs that appeared similar to pears in shape, but were enormous in size, hung from the branches. I found one that had fallen and stood it up. I estimated it weighed at least 50 pounds and stood up as tall as my belt buckle. I removed my knife and sliced a portion off to try. However, what I found upon cutting into it was that the fruit was actually a shell of some sort. I broke a piece off of it to see what it contained within, and what I found appeared to be hundreds of little grape-sized berries. I was considering trying one when suddenly I noticed the berries begin to shuffle around a bit. Something was inside this husk, hiding within. The shuffling grew more urgent, and I saw something begin to emerge. I did not wait around for it to introduce myself. All I managed to see were its eyes, a terrible sight. They were insectile, large, and some combination of red and brown. They looked both agitated and apprehensive, anger fueled perhaps by confusion. A buzzing began to emit from within a giant bulb, the sort of fury one hears when a wasp buzzes too near their head. I became terrified and ran for my life. As I sprinted down the path that I'd once known so well, I passed under many of those fruit bulbs, and sometimes I believed that I could hear rustling or buzzing from within them. After what felt like an eternity, I finally emerged from the trees and back into the open. I looked around to see if I could identify where I was, and that is when I noticed the path had been paved. Never had it been more than just a dirt road, but now it looked as impossible as it sounds, as if it were paved in marble. Then, by God's grace and love, I saw another person up ahead of me. I called out to him, and he turned and stood patiently. I began to ramble on about the strange wildlife and vegetation that I'd found in the woods, but he did not seem surprised. He told me that I was lucky I had not been bitten by one of them, as there was currently no cure. His accent was strange to me. I'd never heard it before in all my travels. He spoke French, but every once in a while he'd throw in a word that I never heard of. I could tell by his speech that the word was supposed to be there, though. I asked him about the marble road, and he smiled, as most proud natives of the land will when someone admires the landmarks, and informed me that the road was nearing 500 years of use and still looked brand new. I asked him how this road could be so old when I'd never seen it. He asked me where I was from, and I informed him that I was born in southern France. That is when the encounter grew stranger. He never heard of any place called France in his life. I laughed, thinking that he was making a game of me, and asked him where exactly he thought he was currently standing in that case. He claimed we were in the country called Torrid. We spent a bit of that day walking together. He told me all about his so-called nation of Torrid, and in return I told him of France. Apparently, they shared the same location in the world, as he knew of all the countries that Torrid bordered, and all those nations bordered France as well. The language was almost identical as well, but when he described certain aspects of day-to-day life in Torrid, there were many differences. He told me how their economy was booming due to Torrid's successful breeding of talking dogs. Nobles and aristocrats from all of Europe and Asia were flocking to his nation to purchase them or observe them in captivity. He told me that medical doctors from Torrid Central College had mastered the science of reanimating primates from the dead with complete cognitive function. He informed me that human trials had begun already, but those that came back had no memories of who or what they were and would become violent easily. He invited me to accompany him in the capital city to see all of these marvels. I was mulling over the idea of going with him when suddenly I was alone once more. The moment my new friend was just chatting away about bringing back the dead, and in the next he was gone. I looked around for him and found that the marble road was gone as well. The hills and odd-colored trees were no longer decorated the landscape, and even the air smelled a bit different. I eventually came across some other travelers on the caravan and realized that I was right back on the original road heading across the French countryside in the direction of Spain. I asked some of the men in the caravan if they'd come across any strange trees or fruit. They assured me they had not. Apparently, they'd left the very same village I had earlier that day, and encountered nothing out of the ordinary. When I got to Spain, I asked many of their leading geography experts, map makers, and even some of the traveling diplomats if any of them had ever seen or heard of a country, city, town, or anything called Torrid. No one had. No one recalled seeing a marble road or any of the landscapes that I described. Eventually, I convinced myself that it must have been a dream. Larson nodded. Thank you for sharing that. What Mr. Cornelius is describing is one of the most rare occurrences in nature, a layer flux anomaly. Even now, we don't fully understand this phenomena enough to advance past general theory. This country of Torrid that he mentions has come up a few times in the stranger end of history, usually as unsolved mysteries or urban legends. A 21st century story once circulated about a man passed through an airport with a questionable passport claiming to be from Torrid. He also indicated that it was in the general area of France. Top researchers believe that it is a layer of reality that isn't in tune with ours. If it were to merge at some point, we likely wouldn't even know it, as our perception would simply adjust to accommodate its existence. The old man Cornelius smiled knowingly before interjecting once more. Oh, you'd notice it, although you wouldn't quite understand it. Generally, it shows up as something that seems wrong, although all the tangible data states otherwise. Larson detected a certain tone of defiance in the old man and was beginning to grow concerned as to what exactly he was hinting at. Cornelius had been recruited for his brilliant mind and uncanny ability to adapt and comprehend new challenges, but he was also known to be arrogant and difficult when the mood struck. What are you suggesting, Mr. Cornelius? What I'm suggesting, Major Lawson, is that perhaps all is not what it seems. Those strange feelings, that sensation that something is wrong, even though all physical evidence states otherwise. How often do you get them? I suppose on occasion, but I hardly think there is some greater cause of this. Are you sure? How about in cases of something that should be very well known to you? Your name, for example. Perhaps even the street that you grew up on, or the name of your first goldfish. Over the last year, I've felt this a lot, with all of this tampering and such. Do you ever wonder why so many aspects of our lives feel alien to us? Mr. Cornelius. Oh, Mr. Cornelius, that's enough, Copeland suddenly shouted. Now just wait a moment, Dr. Copeland. I just want to ask one more question, the old man replied. What was my name yesterday? I know that Cornelius isn't right. If I think back, I can picture my parents calling me Cornelius and everyone else I've ever known. I've signed this name countless times on legal documents. However, I know that isn't my name. No more interrupting. We have a job to do here, and they have a right to know. At that moment, the lights in the room momentarily flickered. Larson rubbed his eyes, feeling the faintest itch somewhere behind them, like a little tingle from his eyes to his brain. Then it passed. You were saying, Major Larson? A petite young lady of perhaps 19 years of age asked. You were just telling us that the governments of the world collected in Moscow, Russia? The young woman was sitting at a computer desk that someone old and wise, but perhaps a bit argumentative, had occupied seconds ago. At least that was what Larson thought was going on. Sometimes that happens in this line of work. Yes, as everyone here knows, from that gathering of world leaders came a groundwork for what we now for what we have now, the access station, the board who oversees what we do here, and of course, our core mission. To exist until we need not exist, the excited researchers bellowed on cue. That's correct, and thanks to the efforts of our very own Dr. Megan Copeland, we believe that this will be the final recalculation. Of course, I believe that it has to be. Should we fail on this... Wait. Larson turned to Copeland. Yes, Major? She asked. Megan. I just called you Megan Copeland. Of course, that's my name. Yeah, did you ever have a nickname? Something with an S? I could have sworn I used to call you something like Savannah or Sarah. Any of this sound familiar? No, I've always been Megan Copeland. Well, Dr. Megan Copeland. If we're keeping it professional. Right. Sorry. Anyways, back on track. Why we must succeed today. The researchers and operators were now leaning forward, the good part at last. Larson was the only known survivor of a TUB. It happened right here, right in this very room. You were all here with me. As he said this, he looked over at the young woman who seemed to just not quite fit in. He had felt that way about her before the lights flickered. He certainly didn't think so. We'd been working on many of the same operations, but we had tried too many times. We were down to the continuity too much, too many refires. If we're writing over history with every recalculation, though, why is the continuity affected at all? Asked someone from the back of the room. We don't know exactly why it happens, but the most widely accepted theory is that nothing is ever erased. It's simply pushed down to some unseen layer of the equation. It still counts, and it still puts some sort of pressure on the intangible straps that hold existence together. If we recalculate too many times, I suppose we run out of room. It overloads something that we don't fully comprehend. According to the laws of physics, a TUB shouldn't even be possible. Basic thermodynamics and the law of conservation of energy, even the concept of zero energy universe, all insist that a TUB can't happen. Yet they can. It's because all of those physical laws refer to energy or mass or conversion and so on. Scientists have cracked all sorts of physical and temporal mysteries over the last few eons or so. But the one that evades us all, the one that trumps everything, is the nature of existence. Everything must conform to this: humans, animals, galaxies, and energy itself. From the largest superplanet to the tiniest subparticle, each and everything must exist. If the building blocks of existence collapse, there's no law of physics in a book that will save you. The energy just doesn't cease converting. It ceases being. Tell us about the TUB, Dr. Copeland demanded. Larson took notice of how closely she was standing to him. He knew the woman well, had been working with her for years, but the look in her eyes of hunger and impatience made him a bit nervous. We started where we always do, at the only confirmable point of stability. As most of you have probably heard, the history that we think we know of the world, even that which was salvaged by the society, is likely incorrect. Sadly, we have almost no way of really knowing how much of it is wrong, and that is one of the reasons why we established this base so far away from Earth. Have any of you ever wondered why we don't cease to exist as soon as we apply a recalculation? After all, we're changing history. By that logic, as any recalculation should potentially alter the timeline to a point where we likely wouldn't remain in this present to observe it. Because recalculations don't change anything until you apply the realignment, came an answer from the staff. That's partially correct. Recalculations do affect the Earth's history as soon as they are applied. However, our station here exists on the temporal axis theory. That's why we have to perform all of these recalculations from this very specific location in space. We are able to phase this station into a pocket of time that allows us to observe our changes without them changing us. But we can't remain here forever. And once we feel that our feel all of our repairs have fixed the issue, we must realign ourselves, so to speak. Once that happens, well, our little motto will make it a lot more sense. We will be reshuffled into the new history, and all of this will cease to be. Now, to shed some light on how we know where to start with our recalculations, allow me to introduce you to Eric, one of our most invaluable members. One of the scientists who was standing near the blackboard wheeled out a table. Sitting atop the table is a jar full of murky liquid and a computer monitor. Cables run from somewhere behind the jar into the monitor. A single cursor prompt flashes on the screen. This is Eric, or at least what's left of him. Within the jar is a sliver of Eric's brain. It's active. Eric lived before the overload and was one of the first recruits pulled for this project once the Axis basis was established. During his time here, he worked with a team much like all of you. He led them much as I do, and he performed recalculations in support of the same. Different. That word suddenly exploded in Larson's head. Eric's mission wasn't different, though, was it? It's always been about preventing the overload. Major, something wrong? Copeland asked. No, sorry, where was I? Yes, Eric. Eric was also the man in charge of who gave the tragic orders to initiate the first and only known realignment. Gasp of nervousness sounded from the crew. That's right. We have realigned once before, and I'm confident that all of you can assume that since we are still here working, that it did not repair our history. A lot of what I'm telling you today is classified. The board has granted me permission, though, to debrief you all completely. We don't want another TUB, and perhaps it was withholding this information last time that led to a failure. So what you're telling us is what we think and know to be Earth's history could be completely incorrect? Dr. Copeland asked, although she was simply doing so to move along the lecture. She received the same instructions from the board as Larson. Yes and no. Not all of it was changed the first time. Thanks to Eric, we can establish somewhat of the baseline for a starting point, but because of the first attempted realignment, we can no longer pinpoint for sure the prime catalyst. Eric was killed the first time around, but as most of you know, the board chambers are protected. Even during realignment, they can retain awareness for a brief period of time. A few minutes at most, but long enough for them to take the appropriate steps. Eric was protected within this board's chambers when it happened, and although he died, his brain was recovered in time to be preserved. An organic computer that cannot crash, so as long as it's fed the right impulse charges to keep going. The young woman, who Larson couldn't quite comprehend, raised her hand. Sir, can we see Eric function? Certainly. If it weren't for Eric, we likely wouldn't know where to even look to begin any sort of recalculations. First off, let me ask you all a question. I want you to type the answer on your screen and send it to the main monitor behind me. I want to do a bit of comparison. Ready? The team nodded. What is the name of your planet? The clicking of many keyboards began, and one by one the answer appeared on a large screen mounted to the wall. The word Earth appeared 14 times on the screen with the corresponding console number for each staffer's computer. Very good, that is correct. Next question. Which famous leader defeated Darius the Third of Persia at the Battle of Guatemala? Yeah, whatever. Once more, answers began to appear on the screen. Alexander the Great was the unanimous choice. Nice work. I'd almost think I was working with the world's greatest historical minds here, Larson joked. The room lit up for a moment with light-hearted chuckles. Lawson wasn't known for his sense of humor, and it was always a pleasant surprise when he allowed a small bit of levity to escape. He continued down the line. At what famous battle was Hannibal defeated? Zama. Where was paper invented? China. Where was the Sherrod dynasty created? India. Larson looked around the room for a moment before asking the next question. What battle led to the Macedonia becoming a Roman province? The questions rattled on, and slowly but surely they began to grow strange. Caesar was suddenly regarded as a president instead of an emperor. Robert Fulton still invented the steamboat, but it was now called the Gateway instead of the Clermont. Fossil fuels were not refined into a usable source of energy on time, causing the advancement of automobiles to be delayed. Now that we have all of your answers that we know came from a possible tainted history, let's talk to Eric. His brain, thanks to the protections of the board's safety protocol, holds knowledge from before the first realignment. He knows the real history, in other words. Caesar was an emperor. Fulton's boat was called the Clermont. And the dates of fossil fuels refinement are different. See? We believe that what Eric recalls is the real history of Earth, and what most of you, myself as well really, understood to be the original run of history is in fact a result of the first mission's failure. I don't like that, a gentleman with a long mustache and thinning white hair exclaimed. Just thinking about it makes my head hurt. Everything we know, everything we've been taught, all false. And that is our fault, this department, Larson replied. We all activated the first realignment. We altered history forever. The original goal was to simply space out the societal advancement in such a way that the big press wouldn't cluster as it did. The board believed that if we could spread out the communications age by just a few hundred years, then we could prevent the overload. No loss of information, no dim ages, no collapse of society. The first attempted round of recalculations appeared to have been focused around the time of the Roman Empire and beyond. What data we do have suggests that Eric and his team were confident they'd gotten it right, confident enough to push the button to activate the realignment anyways. And that is what we've been trying to repair for the last year. Sir, so what you're saying cannot be right. If the realignment is correct, the overload of 2102 were set into motion. Now, how is it that any of us know about the overload? Shouldn't it have been altered for better or for worse? In that moment, the major felt a wave of dizziness come over him. There it was, the golden question, the very question he'd never allowed himself to ponder. Larson always tried to convince himself that the overload would have simply happened anyways, but that didn't sit right with him either. If Eric was trying to correct history to prevent the big press by moving dates around and changing early governments, how could it be the exact same? Then he remembered the dream, the one that had awoken him this very moment with a racing heartbeat. In this dream, he was running across a vast field. Something was chasing him, something enormous and dark, something that was older than the cosmos and wise beyond any comprehension. He continued to run, and as he did, his mind's eye drifted upward, revealing that he was running on one gigantic circle, doomed to forever repeat his steps. He wasn't sure right now if his dream meant anything. He wasn't sure how he suddenly knew what he knew, but he felt compelled to follow his instincts, because our department caused it. Once he said it, he felt better. He didn't like the look on his assistant's face, though. She seemed to be silently fuming with rage. Why this would bother her so much, he didn't know. Why don't we... We don't know everything concerning Eric's first mission. He can only answer short, simple, and direct questions, so it's impossible for us to exactly interrogate him. If we push him too far, we risk permanent damage to the system that communicates with him. What we do know, however, is that Eric's first mission had other, far more classified elements than just a big press. They were working on something else, but we can't get the data from him, and the board either refuses to debrief or was equally affected by the realignment and no longer know themselves. All I know for sure is that my mission has always been to correct the timeline enough to prevent the overload. That's what I was working on last time anyways. The last recalculation that I ordered on that day cost the TUB. I survived it only because the board of directors has a functioning kill switch. It can restart an event at a pre-programmed point in time. Once the point is set, it creates one temporal handshake between the date and the present. I was in their chambers when I gave the last recalculation order. Honestly, by that point, I suspected that a TUB was possible, and we'd been reshaping the time frame a lot, but I didn't suspect we were that close when it happened. Wait just a minute. A middle-aged woman wearing an olive drab dress and slim bifocals said with agitation in her voice, "If this entire mission is to repair the actions of Eric's realignment, then what was Eric's original purpose? Why were we altering time in the first place? What did we do?" The major rubbed his eyes in annoyance. They were itching again, probably all the smokers in the room. He was going to have a talk with the board about banning cigarettes in the data room. He was about to tell them about the TUB, but he also felt as though he was about to explore some other, slightly more taboo discussion. When he opened his eyes, he saw that a heavy-set man in a brown suit was suddenly occupying a desk that seemed as though it should belong to someone else. He tried to picture who should be there, and it caused his head to swim in dizzy sensation that wasn't quite unpleasant, but was still undesirable. "Major Larkson, we really do need to proceed," Dr. Copeland stated firmly. "Please, tell us about the TUB." "It's Larson," he began to reply, but suddenly felt a bit silly. He started the sentence with conviction, but a bit of annoyance that his longtime colleague and friend would mispronounce his name. But by the time he said the name Larson out loud, though, it felt fictitious, like a child giving a false name when they're caught shoplifting candy from a store. It lingered, though. The third instance in the last hour where he'd felt his eyes itch and suddenly couldn't comprehend something that should be as relatable to himself as his parents' first name or the city he grew up in. "Sorry, doctor, I was just thinking out loud again. The TUB, yeah. I had inputted the recalculation as normal and waited for my tablet to display the results. However, the tablet suddenly goes black. With no warning or real explanation, the members of the board calmly stand up. They all produce their little tablets from their pocket, just as nonchalantly as someone removing their wallet to pay at a restaurant. They started tapping away, and that's when I see it rise from the center of their table. The kill switch. I'd never seen the thing before, honestly. I wasn't even sure if I believed it existed. But when I saw it, when I saw the looks on their faces, I knew what I was looking at. They didn't appear afraid or even concerned. They just looked a little annoyed. They knew they'd have to start again. "Enjoy the show," one of them says to me. They don't even have names, and I have no clue which one it was, but there was certainly malice in the tone. I suppose forcing me to watch the collapse of time, space, and matter qualifies as punishment. The TUB starts. I gazed out of the giant glass wall into the board's main conference room and watched as the entire universe around me begins to fade out. It doesn't just happen in a sudden blink. It takes a few minutes, and I felt every bit of it. Stars, galaxies, the solar system, and everything else simply dimmed, like using a dimmer switch on a light bulb. As this happened, though, I dimmed as well. Everything that I ever was or ever could be literally vanished in front of my eyes. This means that everything that made me, every breath I took from the time I was born, everything I ever tasted, touched, learned, loved, feared, or knew, it was all fading away. I'll never forget what it felt like to experience my entire identity melt away all at once. I forgot who I was, what I was, where I was. I became nothing, and to be buried beneath the weight of all that nothing, it felt like an eternity. I was in the darkness. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I was reduced to something below an amoeba, because at least an amoeba has a designed purpose. For what could have been mere seconds or perhaps even centuries, I existed in some form that I will never comprehend. We learn through exposure, and within that place, that isn't a place at all. That is nothing. I failed to exist. The darkness gave me nothing to grasp onto. I couldn't experience emotions because no such thing existed. All I know is that at some point, the kill switch must have finally completed its task, because I was standing before the board receiving my instructions to begin this project. They tell me that we cannot go home until the timeline is repaired once and for all.
Then let's do it, Dr. Copeland whispered and handed Larkson the tablet. He walked over to the blackboard and began to input information. The scientist stood back, smiling and anxious. After carefully verifying his input into the tablet, the major stepped back. His eyes seemed distant, a stoic leader in deep thought. Then, seemingly struck with inspiration, Larkson removed a folded piece of paper from the pocket of his jacket. His team looked on in wonder. Some last-minute notes, Major? Copeland asked. Yes, he answered, and suddenly began to input more instructions and calculations into the tablet. As he did, he quickly backed away from Copeland, creating enough space to prevent any sudden grab at the device in his hand. What are you doing, Larkson? The device was set to our precise measurements. Why are you changing things? A man stood from behind a computer and quickly pointed to a large monitor on the wall. I just synced our computers to the tablet. Look what he's doing, he shouted in panic. All eyes shot to the large monitor on the wall. What they saw on the monitor is what Larkson saw on the tablet, what he programmed into the tablet. The screen was red with a brief warning displayed above two digital buttons. One read cancel, the other read initiate. It wasn't the buttons or the red screen that now had the room in a panic, but rather the warning printed above. Danger. You have unlocked a master reset command. If this screen has been reached in error, please press cancel immediately and report this incident to the board. Pressing initiate will undo all recalculations made from the beginning of this operation. This specific timeline of origin will restore. All changes will be lost. Resetting at this level carries the potential for complete and total universal realignment. The temporal barrier that shields our access point will be ineffective in preventing access crew from experiencing cause and effect. Board members, kill switch, and temporal handshake protocol will be ineffective in preventing board members from experiencing cause and effect. Major, explain this, please. How did you activate that screen? What are you planning? Copeland asked in a stern, flat tone. I figured we had to try something new, he answered and handed her the piece of paper. She read its content. To the crew of Joint Base Terra, greetings. My name is Admiral James Carr, and I am the acting post commander for the 87th Sector, Axis 2. I'm contacting you from the 34th Millennium with grave news. Should you receive this notice, it means that my recalculations were successful. This is likely the last opportunity I will have to recalculate before we cause a TUB. Be advised, the measurements that you believe are correct will fail. This failure will initiate another TUB. Your board members will attempt to activate their kill switch and reset the event. However, what the board has failed to inform you is that your operation has failed thousands of times. You no doubt believe that this is your second time arriving at the final recalculation of this mission. That is false. By our estimations, this is your 9,316th attempt. Each and every time a TUB has occurred. This time, your board will cause a TUB of their own when they attempt the handshake. They have written over these events too many times, and even though your base is shielded from the majority of the impact caused by damaging of the continuity fibers, everything, even the board, has a limit. Your only hope now is to initiate a complete reset and allow history to replay. I'm recalculating to modify your tablet to include a reset option that was never available to anyone besides the highest level of the board. Major Larkson, be advised that your board is recalculating within your access station. Those strange sensations that you've been experiencing today are a direct result of these activities. However, this notification is unique to today. You must break the cycle now, though, as there will be no further opportunities. I am the last human in existence. I have tried to repair the universe by recalculating your actions. However, I have run out of time just as you have. If you fail, I fail. Godspeed, Joint Base Terra. So that's it? Copeland demanded with rage and terror in her eyes. You find this note in your pocket and decide to just erase the entire history of Earth? Are you really going to void all of humanity just because some nonsense scribbled on a piece of paper?
flip the paper over, Larkson replied. Copeland did as he instructed. 6 words were printed on the back of the note. Don't trust Copeland. You are Eric. Who are you? The major demanded. Daniel, I'm Megan Copeland. We've been working together for a year. You know me very well. Your name isn't Megan. I know it isn't. When we left the board today, I called you something else. Why is your name Megan now? Daniel, you need to calm down and hand me the tablet. What was Eric's mission? All of this, the access, the board, all of this is to correct the overload. Then why in the hell does everyone here even know about the overload post-realignment? I want you to tell me what the hell I was doing when we realigned. Daniel, you have to relax and give me the shut the fuck up. Ask Eric. Ask him what his original mission was. No. Larkson slid his thumb to the initiate button. Copeland realized that should he apply the slightest amount of contact, he will likely set off the event. Ask him! Ask him now! He screamed at her. Does it really matter, Daniel? She whispered. I want to know. Wait, no, I want to know, shouted one of the team members. Me too, called out another. I want to know why we've been inputting this data for a year. I want to know why I always feel like half of my memories are wrong. We all do, announced one of the scientists who've been manning the blackboard. Without waiting for Copeland's reply, he began to input the question into the device that communicated with the undying brain trapped within the jar. The response appeared at once. A single word on a screen accompanied by shocked gasps from those in attendance, all except for Dr. Copeland, who simply looked as though she were cheating spouse who had just been caught by a faithful husband. We never thought, she began. Larkson pressed the initiate button. Better luck next time. What do I want to know, Crow? All right. That was a long story. I don't know how long I was reading that, but it seemed like it was a long time, didn't it? Whew. Has everybody liked it? Has everybody liked the like button? Has anybody shared it? Has people been sharing this bad boy? Yeah, Johnny did both. Thank you, Johnny. All righty. Let's see if I got anything else going on here. What's going on here? Oh, maybe if I do this.
Stay a while and listen.
It's true. It's true. All righty. So talk to me, guys. What's been up? I gotta take a little break from reading. Who all is still here? Is anything weird happening in the background? What are you all stressed out about, Johnny? What? What up, Mr. Reality? Alrighty then. So what do you guys think? Should I maybe read some creepypastas or something like that?
You're stressed out about Mr. Reality? Why? Because he was sporting one of my shirts that looked fantastic on him, by the way. The AMSR. All right, I'll read some creepypastas. It doesn't even look as good on me as it did on that dude. Didn't realize Mr. Reality had the freaking body of a freaking Greek god or something. What the hell is what the hell? All right. Creepypastas. All right, guys. We got apocalypse, artifacts, computers, creatures, ghosts, internet, journal, locations, madness, mindfuck, paranoia, reality, rituals, science, sleeping, technology, television, and video games. Which category should I choose? Rituals, huh? All right. Okay, I haven't read this one before. This one's called A Little Gift. Hey, if this is a cool story, this is by Creepypasta Indexer. Maybe I'll actually just throw this on my page and actually make a video if it's cool enough. I'll do a video game, computer game one next, okay? Johnny called out the rituals first, so. Alrighty. Before I begin to relay the details of this ritual, I should probably explain that you need to be in a certain state of mind for it to work. I'm sure a lot of you out there will know what I mean, even though I'm not the best person to be explaining human emotions. It's a kind of churning, constant emptiness, a feeling that although you have no desire to die, life simply takes too long and you would rather have another option. It's very important that you feel this way when undertaking this ritual, because another option is exactly what it'll give you. The details are as follows. I have tried to make it as simple as possible, and to cut down on the cryptic rubbish that my contemporaries often include in these things, but you need to appreciate how hard that is. We don't live by constants as you do. We live by symbolism and meaning. Bread does not sustain us, but the idea of bread makes a very good meal indeed. Still, enough talk. Even if you did want to hear about me, I wouldn't be able to explain it. Apologies for this also, but if you're not a resident of the United Kingdom, you have a little traveling to do. The new world doesn't interest us as much as the old ones, and this isn't going to be as convenient as finding an old hospital or halfway house. You will travel to Suffolk, England, and find a public house called the Queen's Head on the crossroad of four villages: Southwold, Edinburgh, Dunwich, and Walberswick. Walberswick. They've all been well noted by history, though not necessarily in the history books. Anyhow, once there, visit the place during the hours of 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. and take a good look around the pub itself without going inside. The crossroads is a simple one. 4 towns lie in 4 different directions, though new roads may not reflect that accurately. Take a compass with you. Take 10 steps towards each town and then 10 steps back to your original location. Once you have done this for all 4, proclaim, "I have seen this crossroad too many times." Once said, step into the pub. It should look as much as it did in my time, which may well be a shock to you. Don't worry. You can turn around and leave right at that moment if you so wish. Go back to your life and read these stories from the safety of your computer screen. If you do decide, however, to continue this course of action, then go to the bar and ask for a glass of the house Malefic. The barman will give you a glass of red wine and accept no payment. Now, drink it, and you are exactly halfway to where you want to be. Good. Once it's gone, he will tell you that you've had enough and ask you to leave. Doozy says, for though he is a good friend of mine, he is a spiteful man with an old crow for a wife, and he delights in excuses for a fight. When you leave, you will find a large black horse outside. Mount it. It's yours. A little gift from me to you. In gratitude for the task you've performed so far, the wine will have warmed you a little, I hope, for you have a long ride. It doesn't matter in which direction you travel. It never did. The roads will be old, now impossibly so, perhaps, and a dense fog will cover the tracks. Plow ahead and do not deviate from the road. He may send a guard to veer from the mist to try to stop you, but keep moving. He may even send a loved one to plead that you slow down. This is a trick. It is me that he wants to stop. We have never seen eye to eye. The mist will pass, and you will see an end to the road ahead, a gorge of impossible depth. Don't stare into it. Contrary to popular belief, it doesn't gaze back, but it may hold you from your task. And neither of us want that, do we? To continue, you need only one thing. Ride the horse from the cliffside and plummet into the gorge. I never said this would be easy, did I? Don't worry, it's an exhilarating rush. For the most part, I shan't talk of the next few minutes of your trial. It would be improper, after all. Many don't make it this far. They suddenly decide that they have too much to live for. What a joke, as though cowardice and misery were badges of honor. However, those that do have the courage for this. And I commend you, I truly do, will have but one final task ahead of them, the hardest of all. He will appear to you. I've seen him before, more times than I would care to mention, and I know that this next part will be no easy task. You must deny him. He will show you your loved ones, those that have passed from life. He will promise you a life with them. You must deny him. He will offer you bliss and release from pain. You must deny him. Finally, he will offer his friendship and his regard. Deny him. His words are false, and you will find no secure with him. Finally, he will leave. Good. And we will be alone. Now, for your gift. The reward for your efforts, no problem to a being like me. I will touch you upon your forehead once, and you will awake in a bed you find most comfortable. From this point on, you will be possessed of an irresistible charisma, and disease will never trouble you. No wound will harm you, and no argument will sway you. You will be one of my children, and you will recognize others I have dealt with by the black fingerprint on their forehead. The only catch? There isn't one. I'm not like him. I don't deal in punishments. I reward my children. Alrighty. Alright, what was the next one? Computer games, video games. Alright, what we got? Brain Daddy, I read that one last week. Bonus Room. That one's huge. I ain't gonna read that long one. I'll read this one. This one's called Glitchy Red by Hyuk X Hongbin 238. About a month ago, I bought a second Pokemon Red cartridge off eBay so I could start a new game and screw around without messing up my save file. As soon as I compared it to my old one, I knew it was either a bootleg or produced somewhere else. You can see it in the picture how the sticker doesn't fit the front of the cartridge and the red plastic is cheap and almost see-through. If you look close, you can see the internal battery on the second, while the first can't be seen through at all. When I started it up, it only had one option, new game. And unlike the well-loved cartridge I'd been using, It didn't have any wear marks from being inserted into the GBC or anything indicating it'd been used. Well, what the hell, I figured. I'd pour plenty of money into the franchise, and one bootleg game wasn't going to kill me. I popped it into my GBC and started playing. A couple of weeks ago, I lost my GBC for a while, so I had to play it on my SP. No huge deal, though, I thought. When I started the game up, oddly enough, the backlit screen of my SP went out, like I was playing on an old Game Boy Advance or a Color. I thought that was pretty weird, considering the lower setting of my SP screens was brighter than the high setting on all of my friends' SPs. As I took good care of it, and it was unlikely that the backlight would be going anytime soon. But as soon as I switched to playing Sapphire, the screen lit back up. I'd play my other red on this SP plenty, and it never dimmed or any for an old Game Boy game. Sorry. So I just attributed it to the game itself being poorly made, which makes no fucking sense, I know. About now, you're probably wondering when I'm going to start telling you about how there were unknown in my party and the buried alive guy in Lavender Town started eating my player character. Because any pre-owned bootleg game story is bound to be some creepy hack shit. Well, it wasn't that simple. I played through Lavender Town and Pokemon Tower and all that, and nothing unusual happened. I didn't go mad from the music or feel suicidal. My Pokemon never turned white and started crying tears of blood or anything like that. However, as I continued playing, it became apparent to me that this game had some glitches. Just like the cheap plastic casing and sticker that barely stuck, the game itself was flaky. I never played Pokemon on an emulator before, but if I had to guess, I would say that when it was copied, a lot of the data was corrupted and had to be careful with playing it or it would freeze. For example, sometimes the graphics around the player, I'm going to call him Red, as that's what I named him. I'm a bit of a Red fanboy, would turn into a big colored bars and the game would stop and the background music would stop on whatever note it had hit and play this high-pitched staticky whine until I restarted it. This happened whenever I tried to get on my bike inside a cave or building. I was almost sure this was just a normal bootleg game until I examined the SNES in the Celadon department store. Don't judge me, but being a Red fanboy, I've always liked when the game said things from Red's point of view, like how he says, Dad would like this when you examine the SNES, or I should get going. When you examine the TV, since you never get to see the player say anything to the point of where, as a joke, the developers made Red say nothing more than ellipses when you encountered him in GSC. Anyways, when I examined the SNES, where Red would normally say, Dad would like this, instead I saw the text, Where is Dad? I examined it again, and same thing. I kind of laughed it off, thinking for some reason it was poor translation. Don't ask how I thought that made any sense. In the back of my mind, I was kind of hoping for a hack game, because hey, if I got some screen caps and post them on 4chan, I was going to at least be able to kill an afternoon laughing about it. I went to the next floor, and when I went back down to check the NES again, to my surprise, the message had changed. Now Red said, Who created me? At this point, I was pretty sure this had been added in by some hacker and thought that it was kind of awesome. Hell, Red finding out he was really just a video game character? That's pretty funny. After that, and after failing to find any other add-in dialogue, I continued on to the game's story. At that point, I was about near the part where you surf to Cinnabar and the Seafoam Islands, but the glitching was getting worse. Sometimes the map would get distorted, like Glitch City, and Red would be surfing on a tree or a house or some shit, and I couldn't move. I had to fly out and try again. As a kid, I'd always liked doing Missing Number in Glitch City and had a Game Shark back in the day, so the glitches were kind of cool. Eventually, I made it to Cinnabar. GSC. Yeah, that's what it said up there. Now, being an avid glitcher way back when, of course, the first thing I did was fly back to Viridian and do the old man trick. But no matter how many times I tried, I could never get the missing number to appear. I thought maybe the ROM had been edited to prevent glitching, but that clearly wasn't the case, as the thing had more bugs than the fucking Viridian Forest. Instead, when I entered the Pokemon Mansion, I was greeted by the following text window. Red. Nice try, Red. It was obvious that where Red was should be the name of whatever you named your player. What freaked me was Red in all caps as the speaker. At this point, I know I had to have an edited game. The fucking player character was telling me nice try after I'd failed to do missing number. The game froze then, and I restarted it. I hadn't saved since before I tried the missing number glitch. But when I turned the game on again, I was back in the mansion, exactly where the window had popped up. I could move again, so I went ahead and played through the mansion. Call me a pussy, but despite my excitement, I was scared. So I played slowly and with all the lights on. Well, pussy. I was still playing on my SP, and the internal light still didn't work, so I used that as justification for my being a massive pussy. Things only got weirder. After I left a mansion, I got a message. Pa, ding dong, time's up, your Safari game is over. Having done Glitch City in the past, I knew this happened whenever you flew out of the Safari Zone. As expected, I was outside the Safari Zone gate the next time I hit A, with the attendants asking me if I got a good haul. I had an immense feeling of foreboding when I went to leave the gate. Scared I'd be in Glitch City or even worse. I had a flyer, but you have to understand, this is all a little unnerving. Instead, I was in Pallet Town, but there was no music, nothing. Another text window appeared. Red. This isn't where I'm from. I've been lied to. I couldn't move my player after that, so I went to reset, but something stopped me. Instead, I opened the start menu and went to fly the fuck out of there, but to my horror, the Pidgeot I used to fly wasn't there. Just my Blastoise, Executor, Kadabra, Mew from the Nugget Bridge glitch, and Kangaskhan. In Pidgeot's place was a level 16 Raticate with 1 HP. It was poisoned. I checked its stats, and it had the OT Blue and new Hyper Beam, Quick Attack, Glare, and Skull Bash. I don't even know if Raticates can learn all of these moves. I've since heard that Gary's Raticate died seriously in the game, but I had named Gary Douche in this game for a few laughs. I guess the OT name Blue came from the fact that blue is the opposite of red version. Like maybe it was supposed to have come from a blue cartridge? I know Rattata doesn't evolve until level 20, so this was a pretty obvious hack. I had some antidotes and potions in my bag, so I figured what the hell, I'd heal it. But when I left the Pokemon menu, the entire start menu closed and I couldn't open it again. I tried walking, and this time I was able to move. I took a few steps, forgetting the poison, until the box popped up again. Red. We killed it. At this point, I was getting a little freaked out. No fucking shit. I went to my party, and Raticate wasn't there at all. Neither was my Pidgeot. The slot was empty. I closed the menu and tried to move again, but nothing. I didn't want to turn the game off in case it had somehow saved again, so I just kept trying to move before remembering that my Kadabra still knew teleport. When I hit start, nothing happened. I kept trying to move, but I couldn't move. No, Red wasn't letting me move. Red, this happened to me. Why? At that point, I shut the game off. I took out the hacked red version out and put it in the fire red, like with my old game. I'd named the player Red, and for some reason it still kind of scared me. I started it up, and to my horror, the screen was still dimmed. I hit continue on the main menu, but when I tried to open my game, all I got was a message saying that my saved data had been lost or corrupted. And when I started the game, and when
When I started, the game froze with the music just being a staticky whine. At this point, I was really desperate to play some fucking Pokemon where no weird shit was going on. And I was pissed that my Fire Red version was broken, so I threw in some Sapphire and started it up. The screen lit up normally, and I thought for a moment that maybe something was wrong with my SP that broke my Fire Red, and fuck, I didn't want that to happen to my Sapphire with the Jirachi from the Coliseum and the Phoebas. It'd take me an hour to find, so I shut it off and pulled it out. I started playing with what I call Glitchy Red version again about a week ago. When I started it back up, I was still in pallet down. There was music and things seemed normal except for the empty slot in my party and SP screen no longer lighting up. I biked to Viridian and found Pidgeot safely in my PC, so I figured what the hell and took it out and flew to Cinnabar to fight Blaine. When I went to unlock the gym, surprise, another text box. Red. No. No matter how many times I tried, the game refused to believe that I had fucking secret key despite it being right there in my bag. Red wasn't letting me in. Red. Everything that happened to me happened because the world let it happen to me. I didn't become a hero on my own. I was manipulated. I never unlocked that door. The door was unlocked because the game let me in. Everything you do because the game lets you. Because of how the text boxes were, it took a really long time to scroll through. And the whole time I was writing down what he was saying so that I had it on reference. Things were getting a little too Silent Hill for me, and once again, I tried to move, but Red wouldn't let me. Red, I'm going to show you how it feels to be unable to choose your own fate. I gave up and opened the start menu again, glad that I could, and used Pidgeot to fly out of there. I knew now that this was only because Red was letting me fly out. He was toying with me. I flew to Lavender because, shockingly enough, nothing weird had ever happened there. From Lavender, I walked down to try and go to Fuchsia. But as soon as I left Lavender, Red was at it again. Red. No. Well, fuck, I thought. I opened the menu and flew to Fuchsia. When I got there, I nearly shat my pants and dropped my SP. It was the glitch city you get from when you surf along Cinnabar Coast. Immediately, the menu popped up the way it does when you do the Mew glitch, and it was asking me to save the game. There was no option for no, and pressing B did nothing. I shut my game off. When I started it back up, I was still in Glitch City. I checked my party the way Red wanted me to. Pidgeot and Kadabra were there, but instead of teleport and fly, appearing when I selected them, there was only cursed, not curse, like in that fucking retarded creepy black pasta, but cursed. I was smart enough not to select it. I hit B until I was out of the menu, and Red was telling me shit again. Red, you're staying here with me, Red. They replaced me because I was glitched and not good enough. I thought this was my story, but I'm just a character in a video game. They took everything from me, my voice, my freedom, my legacy. They replaced me with the brown-eyed kid. I understood now that he meant Fire Red version, and the gold, silver, and crystal versions were where he'd been demoted to final boss. He let me move, and to my surprise, the game never froze, even as I was walking on water and stepping into houses. Eventually, I suppose I went too far because the screen turned black around my player. Red, am I a joke to you? Yes, no option popped up. I can't tell you how fast I hit no. Red, then why do you do these things to me? Why do you corrupt my world and show me glitches that aren't meant to be? Why do you want to hurt me with the missing number? I never wanted to hurt Red. It was just for fun. The game had bugs, and we've all just exploited them for fun, right? Red, why did I have to die? Just because I'm a hero?
I shut my game off. That night I had a dream where I was a Pokemon trainer, the player from Fire Red who I will never again think of as Red. I was being chased by a white pale body. While I can't feel pain in my dreams, I know some people can, and the pale figure eventually caught me and ripped at my chest and sides with his nails. The last thing I saw before I woke up was the face of my attacker, a little boy with bright red eyes, black hair, and a red and white hat. Hold on. Oh. Boop. Hold on. Dang it. What happened? Okay, here we go. For the next few days, when I played, it was because I had to. I was trapped in the blackness because Red refused to let me go, because he was forsaken and forgotten, left to just be abused by players who came back out of the nostalgia to exploit the bugs. Because I played so much, I almost always had a headache from the high-pitched noises the game makes. I had to call out of work sick. I could never move, but I found comfort in staring at the screen with the black background and my player. Red didn't say anything to me. I couldn't play Fire Red again, even though it worked on my DS. Yesterday, I finally got to Mount Silver on Heart Gold, and I couldn't bring myself to battle Red. I don't know what he'd do to me if I beat his replacement. Would he be angry, happy? Would his defeat put his spirit at peace? I don't know. No matter how many times I play through the games, Red will suffer the same fate because he is a hero. And because the games let him only go so far, Red will never again be able to experience the glory of being a hero. And neither will we. No matter how many times you start a new game, it'll never be the same as the first time you played. You know what's going to happen, you play for nostalgia because it's just a game to you now. I killed Red, and so did you. Unlike Ash Ketchum, he's never going to be the hero of another new game in a brand new region. In Heart Gold, Gold's successor, Ethan had even taken his accomplishments from him, being the one to catch the Pokemon Red had fought so hard for, Mewtwo, Zapdos, Articuno, and Moltres. His life is over for him. He became such a legend that there was nothing left of him to even be proud of himself. I finished Glitchy Red yesterday. When I finally checked my trainer card, there was a sprite of Red as he appeared in GSC, but in the game's same monochrome color scheme, just as red and green. When I looked closer, the red pixels making up his shirt looked darker and arranged oddly, almost like he was bleeding from the chest. None of my badges or time played or trainer ID, just that sprite. When I returned to the menu, instead of my name appearing as Red, there was the word gone for my trainer card. I selected it, and this time the card was blank. Red, go ahead and forget me now. Goodbye. The game reset, the way it does after you beat the champion, and this time there was only one option. New game. I found my GBC earlier today and started playing it on there. When I played on my SP, the screen lit up and everything was normal. I had to start a new game on my Fire Red, but it's working again. Even the bootlegged Red version plays normally, no glitches, but I can never see Red's silence the same ever again, or even the hilarious missing number in Glitch City bugs. I have much deeper respect for the silent protagonists in the game. For all we put them through, Lavender Town used to creep me out, but now I find it very peaceful, even as Red, who wanted revenge on the world that had treated him so horribly, could never mess with the resting place of fallen Pokemon. Someday, I hope to stop waking up with scratches on my torso. What the? That last line was a little odd. Oh, got another story. Hold on. Hold up. Oh, yeah, you're right there. All right. All right, got another story. Hold on. Drink some water and whatnot. Well, it's still going on there, Night Companion. I don't know why you didn't get a... You guys don't forget to like and share and do all that stuff. All that fancy stuff. All right. How's my voice? My voice is doing all right. I'm good. All right, this one is written by Creeps Gamer. Creeps, did you want me to read this? All what stuff quoted from me? Okay, that's what I thought, Creeps Gamer. I was just making sure. This is written by Creeps Gamer. Never go camping at Shepherd Forest. I love camping. It has been a hobby of mine ever since I was 5. My family and I went on camping trips every time I got a break from work. This year, however, none of my family members had the time to go on my December trip. So I asked some of my friends as well, but only Jake was able to make it. This year, I decided we would camp at Shepherd's Forest because it had really good reviews. As we pulled in, I noticed that there was no one else camping. I brushed it off as just having come during a slow time of the year. When we got out of the truck, we heard the light crunch of the colored leaves below us. The sky was blanketed in a long gray cloud. The air was muggy, which told us that the rain was coming soon. Jake and I quickly set up camp. Once we set it up, we unloaded a week's worth of food and drinks. Almost the second we got in our sleeping bags, we heard the crackle of thunder and rain falling like bullets from the sky. It was then that I heard it. At first, it was almost inaudible due to the downpour outside. A slight patter of footsteps or a breath exhaled with the wind beat at the trees above. It progressively became more and more noticeable. Then the click started. A click here, a patter of feet there, and a wheeze next to our tent. I was terrified, but then the noises from whatever it was suddenly stopped. I slowly started to fall asleep. Then I heard it again. It mimicked a human, but the sound was off. It sounded like a man. He was asking someone to help him find his son, but I knew he was just trying to bait me. Then Jake awoke. In a hushed voice, I told him everything that had happened. Jake, after hearing this, whispered to me, "I'm going to go check it out. Stay safe in here. If you think that you're in danger, then scream and run." He stopped for a second. "If I don't come back within 5 minutes, run." With that, Jake left the tent to see what was out there. After a little while, despite his warnings, I went looking for Jake, but I couldn't find him anywhere. I looked all over. Then behind the tent, a bush began to shake. Thinking it was Jake, I quickly rushed over, only to find that he was being eaten alive. This thing was eating Jake. This monster was about 3/4 of the way done with him. The sound of tearing flesh was sickening. This monster had a humanoid, slender-like body. However, it was proportioned all wrong. The lanky arms at its sides, holding Jake's bottom half, were too long for its body. Its head was the only thing besides its shoulders which seemed to fit correctly. The beast's large mouth opened, revealing sharp, long teeth spaced out long and evenly in rows. It seemed like they were fragile. However, the teeth tore through Jake's flesh with ease. Jake's tailbone snapped. This noise returned me to my conscious mind, and I ran. Once I got to my truck, I hopped inside, turning the key to the engine. I don't even remember putting it in. I heard light pattering footsteps sprinting towards me, and I drove away like a madman. Once I got home, I decided to research on Shepherd Forest. I looked everywhere, but I couldn't find anything about a monster. Then I saw police case files. There were hundreds of missing person cases in and around Shepherd's Forest. The next day, I filed a missing
report case for Jake, even though I know they'll never find him. Now, years later, I'm posting this here. I can still hear clicks at night, and on that rare occasion, Jake calling me to come back to the forest for him. But I know it's just a monster luring me back out there. Please, heed my warnings and never go camping at Shepherd's Forest. Well, there's that one. Thank you, creeps. Oh, dang it. All right, hold on. All righty. All right. So what kind of... I thought it was pretty cool, man. I like that it was a slightly different take on a sort of cryptid animal with the rows of teeth and stuff like that. You usually don't get the rows of teeth and things like that. So I like that it was different than the same old stuff that you would hear. You know what I mean? A little surprising that he was able to eat Jake so incredibly fast. But, you know, if he had a massive mouth and rows of teeth like a shark, I suppose it could be done. You know? But yeah, it was a cool story, man. All right, guys. We need another category here. So we've done a video game one. We've done a ritual one. So we have still from Jake from State Farm. He's delicious. So we still have apocalypse, artifacts, computers, creatures, ghosts, internet, journal, locations, madness, mindfuck, paranoia, reality, science, sleeping, technology, and television. Occult one? Apparently, cult's not on the list, which is surprising. You'd think cult would be on there. I'm Jeff from Nationwide. Nationwide is on your side. There's not a cult category. I mean, I'm sure there's cult stories, but there's not a cult category. Mindfuck. I agree. I like mindfucks. I like getting my mind fucked. Fuck my mind. Well, no, I don't want to do a tiny one. All right, I'll read this one. This is written by someone named Egodram. Why don't you send me a link to the story, The Night Companion, in my DMs on Discord, and I'll read it after I'm done with this one. All right, so this one is by Egodram, and it's called And Then There's Martha. I live in the middle of nowhere, far away from the rest of my friends. I have to wake up very early in the morning to catch my bus, and I usually eat my breakfast as it's bringing me to school. I don't have any brothers or sisters. They're just me, the Ziggy, the cat, and my dad. And then there's Martha, the chronically pissed off woman who insists that I call her my mother. But lately, I don't feel so inclined to do so. She's hardly ever around because it seems like she works every day of the goddamn week. As soon as she comes home, the first thing she does is find a reason to start yelling at me or cry about something. No rational human being hates their job that much, and no one is forcing her to continue working there. There's the paycheck, I guess, but no amount of pay seems worth sacrificing the respect of your family. Whenever she's not home, it's quiet and peaceful. Whenever she's home, she's a mess. When she's not screaming at me over some menial task that I didn't do or didn't do right, she's crying about it. Any other person might feel bad about this, but it's such a frequent thing that I've become almost completely desensitized to it. And when she does have a day off, oh boy, I run for the hills. I just can't deal with her bullshit for an entire day. Martha may be the woman that gave birth to me, but by her behavior towards her own family alone, she's hardly a mother figure in my life. I'm 15 years old and I get good grades. I don't cut class, I don't do drugs, and I never really cared for violent video games all that much. Shit, I don't even have a girlfriend. Okay, to be completely honest, there is a reason for that. One that might be, shall I say, uncomfortable for her to hear from her only son. But if she's always coming home so upset and pissed off over nothing, there's no way in hell I'm ever going to consider coming out to her. Martha is never happy. I'm starting to think that something might actually be very seriously wrong with her. My dad doesn't want to talk about it with me. He insists that she takes medication for her issues and that it's under control. She is getting paid to scream and sob like a crazy. Is she getting paid to scream and sob like a crazy person? Because that's all I ever see her do. I literally can't remember the last time she smiled at me. The day she took that job, her personality did a total 180, and the woman who was my mother vanished. Even poor Ziggy has taken to avoiding her when he hears her car pull into the driveway. Maybe cats really do have a sixth sense. 1 week. She left on a business trip to Australia. That was easily the quietest, most peaceful week I've had in recent years. Ziggy had full reign of the house, strutting about in his fluffy glory like he owned the place. Dad and I went to a local motorcycle show in town. So many amazing bikes and shiny leather clothes, too. On the way home from the rally, I told my dad. I told him about, well, myself. He took it better than I thought he would. A few of the other gay kids at my school weren't so lucky. I'm very glad to have a father that gets it. But not long after I broke the news to him, his proud smile quickly sank. His facial features seemed to hang limp off his face like half-molten rubber. Oh boy, he sighed. Your mother. Martha will learn to live with it, I barked. I wanted this part of the conversation to end before it had a chance to fucking begin. And if she has a problem with it, she can stay in Melbourne for all I care. She works so hard for your benefit, you know. You're still her son. She loves you. And a fine job she's done showing it, Dad. How much longer are you going to keep making excuses for her being a shitty parent and a shitty human being? I looked over and I saw my father's mouth crack open for a moment as though he was about to reply, but he didn't. The rest of the drive home was awkward as hell for both of us. When the day came that she was supposed to come home from Australia, she was several hours late. Dad agreed to not give her any details about our previous conversation. He insisted that I should be brave enough to tell her myself. He said that the hardest thing any man can do is be completely honest with himself. I can certainly appreciate him trying to be encouraging and supportive. I just wasn't feeling up to it. My life of leisure was about to come to a grinding halt as soon as she gets off that plane. Sure enough, it finally pulls up to the gate within 10 minutes of it landing. The arrival doors finally open, and just as my heart accelerates in preparation for the verbal ass-kicking I had been quietly dreading for the last week, then there's Martha, warmly smiling at the sight of me. Am I dreaming? Did someone slip drugs into my coffee or something? Or am I just seeing a happy-go-lucky Australian tourist that just so happens to have my mother's build and facial features? She actually ran to give me a hug. I almost didn't want to accept it as it seemed too good to be true. In a way, it still does. On the way home, Martha treated us all to dinner at some highfalutin gourmet burger joint on the other side of town. Those crazy Aussies, man, she crowed, digging into the rarest chunk of ground beef I've ever seen leave a restaurant kitchen.
They love their meat pies and beer, but don't know how to make a decent burger if it meant saving their own lives. I didn't respond to her. I had no idea how to. I ate mine quickly and didn't say a word for the rest of the meal. When we all got home, Ziggy took one whiff of her presence and bolted through my bedroom like his tail was on fire. Martha seemed dismayed by this, but as if she wanted to play with that poor cat like she hadn't bothered in several months. I looked up at my dad. He must have seen the worry on my face, but there wasn't much he could do about it. This person must either be a complete stranger or something very interesting happened in Australia. Several days passed, and it was the same thing. Instead of usual screaming and crying about my faults and failures, Martha always looked elated to see me. She asked about Ziggy's whereabouts a lot, too. I had this awful notion that if I told her that he'd been camping under my bed ever since she got home, too afraid to come out from under it, that something bad would happen. I know it sounds ridiculous. As much of a bitch as she could be or had been, she'd never laid a finger on that animal. The most I had seen her do was shoo him off the table so she could drop a pile of work papers onto it. Then, one day, I came home from school to find that all of the laundry on my floor had been picked up. I'd been washing my own clothes since I was 12. What the fuck was going on here? I ran towards my bed to check on Ziggy, but he was gone. His food and water were still full. I went down into the living room to look around for him, and there wasn't a trace to be found. I found Martha milling about and humming to herself, facing the opposite side of the room. Martha, I stopped myself, took a hard breath, and tried again. Mother, have you seen Ziggy? She pricked her head up and turned to look at me. Very slowly, her eyes grew wide like dinner plates, and a sickening, thin smile spread across her face. She took a few hobbling steps towards me, and my stomach tightened. And then she stopped in her tracks. Dear, she spoke. Her voice vibrated with a saccharine sweet resonance. I don't think I've heard since I was little. You didn't need to keep a secret like that from me. Her head cocked to one side, much the same way as a curious little parrot, only not at all cute like one. You understand? How did she know about that? Dad promised that he would leave that conversation up to me. I stormed out, back up to my bedroom. I'd have locked the door, but I guess I was kind of hoping that Ziggy would eventually come skulking back to his hiding place. A few more days passed. He never came back at all. I posted flyers all over town, but no one had spotted him. I spent the next week either staying after school intentionally or hiding in my room, avoid having to speak to Martha, or for all I knew, this stranger pretending to be Martha. I never in 1,000 years thought that I'd miss the borderline psychotic bitch that used to come home every day and whine for several hours. At least that would have been a sign that everything was normal. Her office called the house. Dad answered it. She missed several days of work without so much as an email or a phone call. They were pretty pissed off about it, too. Ordinarily, I'd say that it was probably for the best, as the usual Martha that I had been so used to would no longer have any reason to be such a bitch, but nothing seemed to change. She seemed as bubbly and as a fat drag queen, always seemed so happy to see me and never hesitated to let me know about it. I started shirking my household chores, seeing if I could piss her off intentionally. She barely seemed to notice. She just cracked that hair-thin smile at me and would make my skin crawl. This continued for another week. The round of bills came due, and Dad was left to wrestle them while dodging a few collectors. One night, I accidentally answered a phone call meant for Dad. He urged me to stay off the phone as he didn't want to bother with creditors calling him. But it wasn't a collector who called. It was a man. The man on the other line had a thick, whiny-sounding accent. He said he was calling from Melbourne, Australia. He said that it was urgent that he be put in touch with my father right away. Is your father there with you? He insisted. I'm with the Melbourne Metropolis Police. This is regarding your mother's stay here for a few weeks ago. Can you put him on, please? Yes, he is. Just a sec.
And I apologize if Mr. Reality is still here for that shitty accent. I turned to look at him. At first, he shook his head, but when I told him where the call was coming from, he raised an eyebrow and grabbed the phone. I went upstairs to my room, contemplated how wrong everything seemed to be going. He said, rate that accent. I went upstairs to my room, contemplate. Oh, I already said that. Martha, the woman whom for the last few years only ever paid attention to me when she was angry with me, seemed to be walking on sunshine ever since she got off that plane. I doubt that she scored any kind of promotion at that job. As if that were the case, she'd have at least bothered to show up for work when she got back to the U.S. What was going on with that woman? Sounds like Mel Gibson. My thoughts were broken by the sound of footsteps rushing up the stairs. I felt my entire abdomen seize with panic as my door flew open. It was my father. Pack a bag right now. His face was gray and rigid like concrete, but I didn't question him. I stuffed damn near everything I could reach into my school bag, tried to fit a few extra things in as well, then made my way downstairs to see my father greeting me. He had one finger over his lips. Obviously, he wanted me to be quiet from here on out. I could only mouth out the words, "Dad, what is it?" But then he shook his head and motioned me towards the garage. We crept past the porch door, and then there's Martha, perfectly motionless, staring up at the rising moon. Quietly closing the door behind us, Dad insisted that I get into the car. As soon as the garage was open enough to do so, Dad hit the gas and we took off into the darkness at night. "Dad," I cried, "Ziggy could be around here some—" "Ziggy's dead," he snapped back, a slight wobble in his voice. I found what was left of him in the backyard yesterday." I swear I felt my heart stop. My little furry friend gone. Terrible sadness overtook me, but what does this have to do with us taking off in such a hurry? What about— That's not your mother. Now there were tears in my father's eyes. "The Melbourne police found her body about an hour ago." Dun 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 dun. I thought that the Night Companion was going to send me a link to this story. And yes, Sir Boogerman is indeed a booger. Sending via email. Why don't you just send it to me in a DM? Don't you have it on the internet somewhere? You can just send me a link. Why the hell is it telling me to sign into chat? Why the fuck should I have to sign in? I'm on the fucking goddamn fucking... What the fuck? Something odd.
Stay a while and listen.
Yeah, what the hell's going on here? It says that I'm not even on. I'm not signed in right now. And now magically I am. Interesting. That was weird. That was really, really weird. Yeah, it's like all of them, like all the police right there, all 3.5 of them standing there like, "By the way, we found your wife, dude." There is my, my email. Had brain fart there.
Hold on, I need to go to my. I'm Uriah. My name is Uriah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I got a weird name. Got an odd name. I'm Uriah Booger Man. You want to get Uriah tattooed on you? I don't know who would name their kid Ho Ho. You know what I'm saying? I really don't know. My middle name is Zenith. Like the highest point of a sphere or the old television sets, Zenith. So my name is Uriah Zenith. It means the highest point of God's light. Uriah Zenith together means. So I figure with a name like the highest point of God's light, I might as well be reading creepy stories, right? Why not? Gotta do something with it. Where is this supposed email that I'm supposed to be getting? God. Or is he still looking for it? Is that what's going on here? She said, my first admin completely missed the mark. All right. I guess I see. I am just going to start reading another short story. All right, guys, let's pick another one here. We've done mindfuck. We've done video games. We've done rituals. We still got artifacts, computers, creatures, ghosts, internet, journal, locations, madness, paranormal, or paranoia, sleeping, science, technology, television. We just not. It's not an option on here, buddy. Sorry, but ghost is. Should I do a ghost one? Let's look at ghosts. I'll do a ghost one here. All right. La da dee, la da da. All right. Ooh, here we go. This one's called Milk and Cookies. Going back to that milk there. It's by Stray Dog, 1980. I've already picked a ghost one. Yeah, sorry. All right, so Stray Dog, 1980. Milk and Cookies. This isn't actually my story. It was related to me. I think that's supposed to say relayed or This isn't actually my story. It was told to me a while ago by an elderly gentleman that frequented a convenience store I worked at. I think back to that night where I followed him into the junkyard and my hair still stands, so along with that quiver of goose flesh that has nothing to do with the temperature. I worked in a relatively quiet part of the city, out on the edge, and we had little to fear from crime. The job didn't pay well, but what little I got helped to pay for some of the bills for college, and the nightly customers were few and far in between, giving me more than enough time to do some reading or languish on the internet. Now, you think that we don't notice people when we're behind the till. We do. We just don't give a shit mostly. We can tell when we should card someone, or that desperate, almost slimy look of lust on the face of a young man buying condoms at 11 in the evening. Then there was the old man. He showed up every Friday like clockwork.
He wore a flannel shirt with the rolled up sleeves that had seen one wash too many, and he counted out his change with the reluctance of one used to thrift. He was polite, that man, always a warm hello and thank you after he left with his purchase. He was stooped with age, but there was steel in that spine, I could tell. And he always bought the same thing, a small packet of milk and a little paper bag of cookies. A strange thing for an old man to buy, a doting grandparent perhaps, but I never saw him enter the shop with another soul. This piqued my curiosity. Boredom has a way of amplifying novelty. Through the long evenings, I counted cracks in the ceilings, arranged merchandise in strange geometric shapes, saw patterns on the repeating square of the linoleum floor. This strange man vexed me. Milk and cookies, a treat for a young child, yet purchased late in the evening, or purchased late in the night. Was he perhaps reliving some long forgotten time in his youth was partaking of these goodies? Dark paranoia raised its head. Perhaps the old man was one of those psychotic perverts that kidnap young girls and raise them in his basement. Week after week, we would swap perfunctory greetings, exchange merchandise for cash. I couldn't unravel the mystery. I couldn't read it in his roomy eyes, his shaking hands, or his slow gait. I couldn't take it, this strangeness. I decided to follow him. It took me a few weeks to plan. I'd pop my head out to track him down the street until the first turn. Then I'd lock the front door and trail him to the next turn, and so on. One day, soon after he'd made his regular purchase, I made my move, quickly locking up, and followed him at a distance, never too close, never more than a block away. There was a feeling of the forbidden in what I was doing, a little like being a child again and doing something naughty. He never suspected a thing. The street lights gave us both long, twisted shadows as I chased him through the darkened streets. He found his destination in an old junkyard, practically a landfill. A rusty chain clung to the floor after he gave it a gentle tug. Nothing worth stealing here, it seemed. The old man walked in confidently, and I had to hurry to catch up. I quickly lost him in that maze, wandering amidst the piles of society's detritus. The light and sounds of the city faded into the distance, and the half-moon in the sky giving everything an unearthly silvery sheen. The panic was there, only a heartbeat away, in that strange alien landscape. I had nearly given up hope when I finally chanced upon a small clearing, my erstwhile quarry sitting there on the dirt, showing his yellowing teeth and a wry smile.
"It took you long enough to catch up," he said.
I stopped short. I had nothing to say.
"Come here, kid. There's nothing to fear here. I reckon something's got your interest all fired up. That's why you followed me here. You'll get into no trouble for this. The owner trusts me. She knows I don't steal, and I'm okay to close up shop early."
Oh, the owner trusts me. She knows I don't steal, and I'm okay to close up shop early if business is slow.
Slow enough that you'd spend half the night playing spy to hunt down an old codger like me?
He laughed, a dry, wheezing series of exhalations that broke into coughs.
"I'm here," he said, pressing his forearms against his creaking knees to get to his feet, "to keep a promise an old promise. I come here every week because that's all I got left. Ain't much left in the world for me. No wife, no kids, no job. But a man's got to be true to his word. If he don't got that little bit left, well, he ain't got much of a man. Then he ain't much of a man, is he?"
I had to nod to keep him going. He gestured at something behind him, shifting out of the way to let me see. A pair of pale doors jutted out from the junk, looking so much like the entrance to some ancient crypt. The old man pulled one of the doors open. The shriek of the hinges carried through the still night air. Even from a distance, I took in the thickness of that door. I quickly closed the distance between us. The man placed the milk and cookies behind the threshold of the door and pulled it shut. He reached out a hand in greeting and introduced himself as Miller. He didn't say if that was his first or last name.
Back of a refrigerator truck, he said, giving the door a slap.
The dull smack again reminded me of how thick the walls were.
I guess you're curious as to why I'm here every week. It's a long story and one I haven't told to many people. I'm old now, ain't got many years left. My bones ache in the rain and it hurts more and more every day. I guess it's worth telling.
His voice seemed to gain strength, a rich baritone instead of the weak, cracked sounds earlier.
It was back in the old days, before the Second World War. I never served, of course, too young then. I must have been 9, maybe 10 years of age. We didn't have all these newfangled toys and computer thingies.
He pronounced the unfamiliar word slowly. His jaw worked around the edges of the syllables.
That you have nowadays. Back then, we'd play wherever we could. Cowboys and Injuns, cops and robbers. No television either. That was for the rich folk. This yard had been here longer than I have. We had forts on hills of trash, played soldiers, everything kids ought to be doing. That day was hide and seek. The old one game, but a great one. But a great one for a place like this. I wasn't a big kid. I didn't win at most of the games we played, but I was going to win this one. I'd seen this big old refrigerator unit here before, right on the edge of the yard back then, and I knew exactly where I was going to be hiding. I was small, yeah, but I was a fast un. May not look like it now, but I got away from the pack of them even before the count had reached 20. Didn't want no one else to hide in here with me. It was dark in there, cool too, before I closed the door. I could see that some of the junk had made its way into the truck unit over time. Last thing I remember seeing was one of the line of the daylights before I pulled this here door shut. At first, there was nothing but the sound of my breathing, bouncing off the walls. I imagined I would always win at hide and seek. From then on, I counted breaths and heartbeats until I got bored. Then I realized that there wasn't a handle on the inside.
I could see his hands starting to shake as he remembered that old fear. He clenched his fist to stop the shakes, and when the balled fists themselves started quivering, he put his hands in his pockets.
It took me a while to realize the game was over. I'd been in the dark for a long time. Too long. I threw my entire weight at the door, hit the walls till my hands were bloody. I screamed till my throat hurt.
His Adam's apple bobbed up and down as he swallowed at the memory.
Then I sat to wait. I must have fallen asleep. How can you tell if you're asleep when you're all alone in the darkness? You can't, boy. You can't. I got thirsty first, then hungry. It's the only way I knew time was passing. I felt the hope go out like the sun setting. I yelled in that dark place. I called out to God, but he didn't answer. I would have called out to old Nick himself if I had dared. I cried. For hours in the dark I cried, the sound bouncing off of those thick walls, till the air was filled with the sound of tears and sobs. I thought I was going to die. Have you ever been close to death, boy?
No, sir. I shook my head. He fixed his eyes on mine. Those almost cloudy eyes suddenly sharper.
No, you haven't, I can tell. When a man's looked death in the eyes, he just ain't the same after that. It was a trick of the echo, I thought at first, but I swore there was another person crying in there with me. It sounded a little higher, a little further away than my own voice. This was it, I told myself. I'd been in the dark so long that I was going batshit crazy. I counted to 5 and held my breath, and still the crying continued. I was rapt. The man was looking at me, but not looking at me. The dreamy half-focus of his eyes told me he was seeing something else, something far away. Thank you, Night Companion. I called out in the dark. At first there was no answer but that quiet sobbing. It was another child, but not a boy, a little girl. There was enough light before I shut the door that I know that I was alone in there. I was panicked a second before, but now I felt a creeping fear. Then crying started up again. I backed myself into the corner next to the door. You ever seen a mouse in a cage trap? When it tries to get away from you, yeah, like that. The crying didn't get any closer. I figured I was dead in there anyways, and nobody was coming to get me, so I called out again. The crying stopped. There in the dark, the little girl answered. She sounded like she was about my age as well. She told me her name was Helen. A pretty name, even then. She'd been stuck there in the dark for a long time. She tried calling for help once, but no one came. She got real hungry, and she wasn't so hungry no more. She'd given up on calling for help, on seeing her family, of ever having another friend. The walls, she said, were too thick for any sound to escape, and nobody would ever know that I was in there. Nobody'd ever found her. One good thing, at least she wouldn't have to be lonely anymore, since she had me. I heard her shifting there in the dark, and she held my hand. Her hand was small, and it was cold, like she'd been put in a freezer for a few minutes. But it was all I had, and I squeezed it with all my strength. I dreamt that there were voices outside, calling my name. I wasn't sure about it until I squeezed my ear to the corner of the door. The lining must have been rotted with age, because I could still hear something from outside. If I could hear them, maybe they could hear me. I tried to scream, to shout. All that came out was a tiny croak. I'd been too long without water. I tried to wet my tongue with spit, but even that failed. I slapped at the door with my free hand. The time without food and drink had left me weak. I wasn't sure that they could hear anything from me. Hope died there a second time. The dark box was going to be the last thing I ever saw, and nobody would know. I felt Helen's little hand tighten around mine. Don't go, she told me. Stay. It'll be fun. I've been alone for so long. She started to pull me back into the depths of the dark place. I couldn't fight her. She felt so strong. Please, I whispered to her. My parents will miss me. I still have friends outside. Even with her tiny nails drawing blood from my hand, I could feel her sadness through that tiniest bit of contact that we had. I have no more friends. Her crying started again, soft in that space, so sad that it seemed that her heart would burst from it. I can be your friend. Help me, I promise. I'll be your friend forever. I'll be your friend forever. I told her, and I meant it. I saw the old man's hand flex in his pocket, remembering that ghostly touch. Oh, wait. I saw the old man's hand flex in his pocket, remembering that ghostly touch. She let go. Well, maybe she was never there. I touched my hand to my cheek, and it was still cold. Just then, I heard the door open. I'd been found. Strong hands lifted me out of the dark. The light hurt my eyes, and it was a while before I could see my rescuers. Someone brought me water. I gulped it down. It was the best thing I ever tasted. No water ever tasted the same since. Tasted like life, you know? They sent for my parents, and I sat there with the big man who'd found me. He sized me up with a squint, said I was bigger than he'd thought, and the voice he'd heard was much higher, almost like a girl's cry. He messed up my hair with one huge rough hand. No shame in crying in there, boy, he said. If I was stuck there, I'd be scared too. My parents came to see me, brought over by the police. They scooped me up with big hugs. We were going to leave when I asked if they found the girl in there with me. The rescuers looked puzzled. They had been only one in the refrigerator truck. I'd been the only one in the refrigerator truck. I wouldn't leave until they took another look. I kicked up such a fuss that they just exchanged looks of frustration and brought me back to those huge doors. They threw them open. No girl came out. The light didn't reach all the way to the back. One of the cops took out a flashlight, one of those big silver ones. You don't see them around anymore. The trash of the junkyard had found its way into that old refrigerator truck. It was only on a second sweep of that unnatural cave that we saw a bright blue girl's dress. He sighed deeply, his tail near its end. He suddenly looked very frail, as though the telling had leached the very life from him. She'd been dead for years, of course, all dried out like one of them mummies from the National Geographic. I think I went a little crazy when I saw her. I don't know what I said, but nobody believed me. Been in that dark for too long, they said, apt to drive a boy mad, but I never stopped believing, and I never forgot my promise. 70 years it's been. What transpires between us, well, that's just for me and me alone to know. I've not always been able to come here, but I've tried my best, which is more than some men can say. He leaned against the door, out of breath after the sharing. He straightened up and cleared his throat with one hand on the thick metal. Good night, friend. I'll see you again next week. His voice was suddenly clear again, and the sound rang out across the junkyard. I half opened my mouth to return his farewell, but I realized that his eyes weren't on me. No, they were focused on the door instead. He slowly made his way across that clearing. I stood up, also leaning against the door for support. Sir, you forgot your milk and cookies, I called out to the man, now all the way across the clearing. He looked back again, and I could tell that he was not looking at me, but at the doors I was leaning against. No, boy, I did not. Good evening to you, too, and I will see you next week. A strange encounter, I thought. The unease I had felt with the telling of the story slowed off me. A simple campfire tale, nothing more. Just some old man, probably addled with dementia, living out some half-imagined childhood fantasy. I sighed. The moon was already high overhead. I suppose that there was worse ways to spend the evening. One thing niggled? What the hell is that? At me, just before I turned to find my way from that still place. For the second time that evening, the refrigerator doors were pulled open. A wave of stale air belched out. I half expected to see Helen's bones still laid out after all these years. There was nothing there. I chided myself for my childish fears, giving a little nervous laugh. Nothing in the empty crypt of the refrigerator truck but an empty milk packet and cookie crumbs. Ooh, they was empty. All right. Cults are good lord. Oh, good lord. All right, then. We're going to give this a read. Oh, all right, Johnny. See you later, man. All right, this will be the last story of the night here. This is The Cult by the Night Companion. Blood is the sacred connection to the world beyond this, as it empowers those who seek its powers and inherit abilities. But with everything, a price must be made to achieve such things. I roamed the woods behind my home all the time. As a kid, I knew it like the back of my hand, knowing where all the best spots were for anything. Although the woods were secluded and not very many people ever ventured inside them, I found it to be my sanctuary, a place where I could escape to. My life revolved around those woods, where
where I was left to be a wild child and alone to my imagination. I would have adventurous journeys in the woods, but when nightfall had started to consume the woods with darkness, I would come home in a quickness. My parents were never too fond of my love to sneak out there alone, as they tried to keep me away. The years passed. I became less and less in tune with my connection to the woods. I also had made the decision to leave for the higher learning benefits of college, as I then moved away, leaving my home and my parents behind. Oh, excuse me. Now, this is where my strange encounter begins. I've taken a break between semesters to come back to my parents' home. I figured I'd rather spend time with my family than to find myself stuck on campus grounds. Arriving back at my parents' place, I was greeted by family who caught wind of my visit. They all started talking about when I was little and so on, but later the whole family started to make the best of things. A gathering of people developed, and everyone was enjoying themselves. Music, drink, and food filled the air. The environment changed that left me with this wasn't a bad idea as I made the notion of thought. Because here I am back where I've always felt connected to everything. I was pleased and happy to say the least. As the party started to wind down, only a few members of my family stayed for a small bonfire in the back. Everyone who was there was either drunk or in a chill state of mind, as some decided to indulge in some party favors. A select few were laid back because of the comatose feels they got from all the food. I was getting there, filling up with the grilled burgers and hot dogs, and seemed to hit the right spot in the deepest part of my stomach. Darkness seemed to creep up fast, and the fire itself was starting to look like a scene from a horror film. You know, the kind that revolves around a bonfire, where they're looking to make sacrifice offering to some set entity of the dark. Little did I know this was just the beginning. The night seemed endless as more and more disturbances began to unravel before my eyes. What I clearly remember, as family only now seemed to present me with strangers all around, one by one the circle began to tighten up and the people began to change. I became absent-minded to my surroundings as I wasn't in the back of my home anymore. Something was wrong, and I was in the middle of this unfortunate happening. I tried to get up, but was bounded to a seat. The circle began to chant and hymns. I could hear all around. I could hear them all around, their voices hissing, and their stares glaring at me. The surroundings of this place were familiar. I knew now where I was, the woods of my childhood, and this time I was in the middle of the night. It was in the middle of the night. They started sharpening a ritualistic knife in front of me and then continued to chant gibberish. I don't know what they were saying, but I knew there wasn't going to be an ending where I was back on campus looking forward to the next semester of college. I blacked out. I black out and only came to the sharpening pain of my wrist being opened up, but not in a manner that leaves me to bleed out quickly, but a slow result of bloodletting. This only gave me the impression that I was going to suffer a whole lot more. A whole lot more than I would like to at this point. They said it's time as the fire grew. The blood was passed around, being offered to everyone within the circle. I could feel a presence of something far worse rising from the ash and pasted the hot inferno in front of me. Then the most horrid screams and sinister laughter seemed to resonate within me, then pushed forcibly outwards, drawing to fears of being helpless in the action of these crazy people around me. Suddenly, blows to my chest and back were felt in rapid succession. I soon fell in a daze where I could no longer stay awake, as the last of sensations were only the celebration of people and a deepened growl coming from the flame. A deepened growl coming from the flame.
I woke up, confused and a little off balance. A semi-worried look from my parents only left me more in a state of what the hell happened. I remembered only dying and bleeding. Everyone who was there at the moment was only family, not strangers. I packed my things and headed back to my college campus. I couldn't let go of what happened, but I also had the feeling that everything was going to get better in my life. I knew this as I felt a force compelled me to think so. The Night Companion. It's all good, dude. It wasn't nearly as bad as a lot of other ones I've read. Like a lot of other ones I've read, like the wording, it's like, what? So, no, that wasn't bad at all. It was just a couple things. It's all right, dude. It happens. It happens to everybody. But I think I'm going to call this Murder Monday. So I hope you all have a wonderful evening. No, you're good, dude. It's fine, man. It's fine. It's not that big of a deal. But I hope you all have a good evening. And thanks for hanging out. I appreciate you. And yeah, have a good one. Oh, no problem, man. Every Monday. I have a blast doing this. It's fun.